That short introduction of the story. Our story begins with a boy born out of wedlock into one of the strongest martial arts clans. From a young age, he chased only one thing: acceptance from his family. But everything crumbled when he was diagnosed with a condition that stripped him of the ability to train in martial arts or magic. Branded as useless and cast aside, he was ultimately betrayed and killed by his own kin. Yet fate wasn't finished with him. He was granted a second chance, sent back to the moment of his birth, armed with new powers and a burning will to rewrite his destiny. Our tale picks up in the remote northern lands of Korea, an uncharted territory untouched for centuries. A team of mercenaries ventures into the unknown, flanked by a mysterious group of masked figures. One of the younger mercenaries watches the masked group cautiously. His partner notices and asks if it's his first exploration mission. The young man admits he's tackled gates and dungeons before, but this is his first journey into unexplored lands, and it's unsettling. His companion laughs, warning him to stay sharp. No one's been here in hundreds of years, and the place is likely crawling with dangerous beasts, maybe even ancient ones. But the younger mercenary remains hopeful, saying they can count on their leader. After all, he's a member of the famous Marshall Lee family, the patriarch's own brother, no less. That kind of lineage must mean serious power, right? The older mercenary scoffs and shoots a knowing glance at the leader. "You mean that guy?" he says with a smirk. He reveals that the expedition leader is nothing more than the Marshall Lee family's discarded illegitimate son, kicked out for being too weak. And then we see him, Cheol, the ninth illegitimate son of the great Marshall Lee clan. Our protagonist. The mercenary continues, saying Cheol's always lacked talent. He hasn't advanced beyond 7th rank, even at his age, and seems lazy to boot. Just then, one of the masked figures approaches Cheol and says it's time to move. Cheol silently observes him for a beat, then nods and gets to his feet. These masked individuals are no ordinary guards. They're from the Shadow Lade unit, elite warriors who serve directly under the Marshall Lee family patriarch. Their mission? To protect Cheol. But Cheol has his doubts. Something feels off. Something about this whole mission smells like a setup. Flashback to a time when Cheol's future looked bright. Despite being an illegitimate child, he had dreams, ambition. He wanted to rise within his clan. His heart soared with hope the day he was chosen by the family's highest-ranking weapon during the steel ceremony. Back then, Cheol truly believed that with enough effort, he could earn the approval of his clan. He was certain that hard work and persistence would eventually be enough. But reality had other plans. His hopes were crushed when he was diagnosed with a rare condition that damaged his mana pathways. The doctor's verdict was brutal. Magic was out of the question, and even martial arts would be unstable. Under such circumstances, reaching the 9th rank was considered impossible. When the head steward brought this news to Cheol's father, it struck him deeply. But the rest of the family didn't share the sentiment. They dismissed the steel ceremony, where Cheol had been chosen by the top-ranked weapon, as nothing more than a fluke. Still, Cheol didn't quit. He fought through the odds and made it to the 7th rank by the age of 25, determined to prove the doctor wrong. Though all his siblings had reached that level much earlier, Cheol was proud. But his celebration didn't last long. On his 30th birthday, he was officially cast out of the clan. Had it not been for his eldest brother's protection, he wouldn't have left alive. For the next 10 years, Cheol lived on the run. The world around him spiraled into chaos. Unexplored zones grew wider, and monster attacks became more frequent and violent. Reduced to a beggar, he sat slumped on the streets one day when a gust of wind slapped a newspaper into his face. He caught it absent-mindedly, but as his eyes scanned the page, tears welled up. His father, the former patriarch of the Marshall Lee family and once a martial arts legend, was dead. Just as the weight of that news hit him, a voice called out, addressing him as young master. Cheol looked up and saw 2 members of the Shadow Blade unit standing over him. Anger flashed in his eyes as he tossed the paper aside and demanded to know how they found him. They didn't answer. One of them simply handed over an official scroll. Annoyed by their silence, Cheol unrolled the decree and read through it. It was an assignment, an exploration mission in a particular region. But what really caught his attention was the signature, Lee Gunsong, his 3rd brother. Cheol froze, confused. Why was Lee Gunsong the one issuing orders? What had happened to his eldest brother? Before he could ask, one of the masked men informed him that they would depart in an hour. As the man turned to leave, Cheol quickly stopped him and asked about his eldest brother's fate. No answer. The silence confirmed what Sheol feared. Something was being kept from him. And as he held that decree in his hands, he couldn't help but wonder, why had he been summoned? He hadn't touched a blade in a decade. He was only 7th rank. So why now? Why him? The masked figure turns back to Sheol, his voice cold and sharp, asking if Sheol intends to reject the order. Sheol knows exactly what refusal would mean: death. With no other choice, he agrees to go through with the mission. Without another word, the Shadowblade members vanish like smoke, leaving Sheol stewing in frustration. No answers, no explanations, just a forced hand and a mission he didn't choose. Back in the present, Sheol walks silently among the mercenaries and masked men as they make their way deeper into the wilds. The silence is broken when one of the mercenaries suddenly stops, eyes wide in disbelief. In front of them stands a building, old, abandoned, yet surprisingly well-preserved for a place untouched for centuries. Before they can say much, one of the masked men states plainly that they're going in. No discussion. The group steps through the gate and begins carefully moving through the structure. But what they find inside makes their blood run cold. Piles upon piles of bones, skulls, and remains scattered across the floor, some clearly human, others far more monstrous. And lying at the center of it all, the corpse of an ancient beast. That's when it happens. Without warning, one of the masked men gives a single command, and chaos erupts. The masked assassins turn on the mercenaries, launching a sudden, ruthless assault. In seconds, the expedition turns into a massacre. Mercenaries are cut down one after another, their screams swallowed by steel. Only Sheol and one other mercenary manage to stay alive for a moment longer, frozen in disbelief. They shout, demanding to know what's going on. One of the masked attackers answers mid-swing, slicing down the man beside Sheol. He tells Sheol he should have known from the start. This was a death sentence. But, he adds, it's an honor to die serving the clan's will. As he raises his weapon for the final blow, a blade bursts through his side. Sheol is the one holding it. With eyes blazing, Sheol demands to know who ordered this betrayal. But to his horror, the masked man doesn't fall. Instead, he grips the blade stuck in his body, smirking. They were told to lure Sheol here and kill him quickly, cleanly, no witnesses. With terrifying calm, the assassin crushes Sheol's sword with his bare hand. Then comes the final blow. His wounds begin to close, healing right before Sheol's eyes. Sheol steps back, stunned. He's up against something far beyond human. Just then, one of the remaining mercenaries tries to strike the masked man from behind, but he doesn't get the chance. In a flash, the masked figure spins around and cleaves the man in two with a single, merciless strike. Sheol drops to the ground, narrowly avoiding the same gruesome fate. Pain shoots through him, but before he can recover, the masked attacker sneers down at him, mocking him for thinking he'd be anything more than a weakling. In the next instant, the masked man vanishes from sight, only to reappear right in front of Sheol, driving a brutal kick into his chest. The impact launches Sheol across the room like a rag doll. He crashes into the decaying corpse of the ancient beast lying nearby. His body screams in agony. Blood spills from his mouth. Every breath is torture. But within that pain, something ignites rage. Raw, burning rage. Sheol clenches his teeth. He refuses to let it end like this. Not without a fight. Desperately, he scans the room, looking for anything that might help him survive. That's when he sees it, a sword, old and weathered, lodged deep in the body of the fallen beast. Without a second thought, he rushes toward it. If it was strong enough to kill this creature, he thinks, then it has to be strong enough for me to use. With all his remaining strength, he pulls the sword free and stops, frozen in disbelief. The blade disintegrates in his hands. It crumbles into dust and disappears into the air as if it never existed. Sheol is speechless. He can't process what's happening. Why? Why now? Behind him, the masked man draws closer, scoffing at the sight. To think someone from a martial Lee clan would be this pathetic, he mutters. At least you'll die with a noble name. He raises his weapon and strikes. Sheol collapses, fading fast. He wonders if this is really how it ends. A life full of pain, rejection, and endless running, snuffed out in an abandoned ruin, far from everything he fought for. As his consciousness slips, the sword's remains continue to vanish, scattering like ash. In that moment between life and death, a voice echoes through the darkness. A voice that stops Cheol cold. Is this child Yu Jiango's son? It's his father's voice. Cheol's eyes snap open. He sees his father, alive, young, and speaking to the head steward. The steward replies solemnly that Yu Jiango had already passed when they found her. Cheol's mind reels. His father is supposed to be dead. So is the steward. Yet here they are, both looking decades younger. He tries to call out, to make sense of it, but when he reaches for them, he freezes again. His hand is small. Too small. He looks closer, and the truth crashes down on him. It's his own hand from when he was a baby. Cheol stares, overwhelmed, unable to process what he's seeing. Is this death? He wonders. Is my life flashing before my eyes? But then, he hears his father speak once more. Young, that'll be a good name for him. He then tells the steward, Choi, to assign a servant and a few Shadow Force members to guard the child. And just like that, it begins again. He's ordered to get ready for the steel selection ceremony, alongside the 8th child. The steward bows and accepts the command without hesitation, but he raises a concern. Both boys are far too young. The 8th child is barely older, just a few months ahead. But the leader of the Martial Lee clan, Cheol's father, brushes off the concern. It doesn't matter, he says flatly. That answer leaves Cheol even more stunned. Only after his father finally walks out does he manage to breathe again. The man's presence alone carried a suffocating weight, raw power, and control. It had been years since Cheol last saw him, and yet the impact remained the same. Alone again, Cheol starts to reflect. Is this really happening? Everything around him feels so vivid, so real. This wasn't a memory. It wasn't a dream. That conversation actually happened. Still, he tries to convince himself otherwise. Because if this is real, then he's been thrown back into his painful past all over again. Months pass. Time moves forward, and the day finally arrives. Inside the prestigious Martial Lee clan, the steel selection ceremony is about to begin. It's the day when the clan's young heirs are chosen by the weapons that resonate with them. His father had once been chosen by many, earning the title of the greatest swordsman of his era. His eldest brother, Thomas, had also been favored by the blades, rising to fame as a master of both sword and magic. Now it's Cheol's turn. He feels the pressure building, tight, relentless. But before he can spiral into those thoughts, his maid, Gawa, enters the room, beaming. Young master, you're all ready, she announces cheerfully. She picks him up gently and praises him, amazed by how composed and silent he remains despite being in a completely new world. You're a strong child, she says warmly, and I'm sure the ceremony will bring great things for you. You're meant for a bright path. To Cheol, Gawa was more than a maid. She was the only one who ever treated him like he mattered. She had cried for his loneliness when no one else did. But in the past, she was driven out of the estate, cast aside by the cruel schemes of his older siblings. Not this time. Cheol silently swears to himself. He'll protect her, no matter what. Just then, another maid steps in and announces that everything is ready. It's time to head out. At that same moment, news reaches Lord Li Taishin. The preparations are complete. No delays. It's time. Lord Li Taishin begins walking toward the ceremonial grounds, followed closely by the children and their attendants. When they arrive at the sprawling site, already filled with clan members and onlookers, whispers ripple through the crowd. All eyes turn to Cheol, the boy from outside the clan, an illegitimate child. His background is a mystery, except for one undeniable truth. He is the son of the clan leader. Among the spectators, the elders begin to murmur. Lady Baekwayan, the clan minister Lord Lee Jae-hong, the first son Mong Jiango, and the third son, Gunsong, are all present. Myong Jiango remarks with a trace of disbelief, saying he doesn't remember any of them ever joining the steel selection ceremony at such a young age. Gunsong agrees, noting how strange this all feels. He's puzzled. How did this unknown brother suddenly end up in the ceremony? Still, his curiosity keeps him from looking away. With all eyes forward, Patriarch Li Taishin steps forward and raises his voice, officially opening the steel selection ceremony. He signals to an attendant to bring forth the 8th child, Hua, the 8th chosen for the ritual. The attendant carefully presents the young girl. Lord Taishin pulls out a small, gleaming blade from his pocket. Taking Hua's tiny hand, he slices her fingertip. She gasps, then cries from the pain, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. But the ritual continues. Moments later, a hush falls over the crowd as one of the revered swords, the ivory blade, begins to glow. It chooses her. This masterpiece of a weapon, untouched by previous generations, responds only to her. Lord Li Taishin lifts the blade high and announces that from now on, it belongs to Hua. The attendants cheer and rush to congratulate Lady Beck on this momentous occasion. She smiles with quiet pride, graciously accepting the praise. Then, Lord Taishin's voice rings out again. It is now time for Young's ritual. At once, murmurs return. The illegitimate child? The one brought in from beyond the estate? Confusion and disbelief spread like wildfire. How could someone like him be allowed to take part in such a sacred event? Despite the whispers spreading through the crowd, the patriarch pays them no mind. He carries on with the ritual. Gently, he takes Chiol's hand and makes a small cut on his finger. The child flinches at the pain, but doesn't cry. The patriarch, noticing his quiet strength, gives him a light pat on the head, a wordless gesture of praise. Chiol stands still, his mind briefly drifting back. In his past life, the sword that chose him was the clear Echo, one of the fabled heavenly rank blades. But he knows better now. That was a different life. Past victories hold no guarantees in this one. Lord Jaehong watches from a distance, keenly aware of the crowd's discomfort. The disdain toward an illegitimate child participating in the clan's sacred ceremony is impossible to ignore. Even Lady Beck's expression has darkened. Yet, Jaehong doesn't find the boy's existence all that shocking. His brother having a child out of wedlock? Hardly unheard of. What worries him more is the harsh path that lies ahead. Life within the clan will be brutal for someone like Chiol. The odds are stacked against him. As tension mounts, Elder Li Chiol Jiango finally steps forward. His very presence causes a hush. He seems unusually focused on Chiol, and Jaehong greets him with careful respect. Still, there's no reading the elder's expression, only the sense of unease it stirs. The old man turns to Jaehong and asks plainly, "Is this the child the patriarch brought here?" Jaehong nods. Yes, the shadow force discovered him and returned him to the estate. The elder seems baffled. Why would he bring in an illegitimate boy with no known heritage and let him take part in this sacred ceremony? He pauses, then shrugs. Still, if the patriarch has tested the child himself, who are we to question it? Even so, this ritual, it's meaningless for a child like him. That last remark hits a nerve. Minister Jaehong's eyes flash with anger. What exactly are you implying? The elder bows slightly and replies, "No offense meant. It's just, I speak from experience. I too was born outside the main bloodline. No weapon ever chose me. It's a common fate for those like us. An illegitimate child should know his place." That's the final straw for Jaehong. He explodes, his voice cutting through the crowd. Enough. I will not stand here and listen to this any longer. But just as his words echo across the grounds, a blinding light erupts from the ceremonial altar. Everyone freezes, stunned by its brilliance. The elder's face goes pale. He stares at the glowing weapons, unable to process what he's seeing. Even Jaehong is speechless, eyes wide with shock. But then, slowly, a different expression takes over. Wonder. Then pride. This can't be real, he whispers. And yet it's happening. The radiance intensifies. Weapons shine with unprecedented brilliance. The blood spirit spear, the iron epic blade, the legendary heavenly Mayho, the celestial dragon bow. Each one responds. Even the sacred relics that had already accepted masters are now stirring, as though drawn to Chiol's presence. The entire clan watches in disbelief. Elder warriors grip their weapons only to find them trembling in their hands, reacting to him, the illegitimate son no one wanted to acknowledge. Myong Jiango, the eldest brother, stares in disbelief. Can anyone even believe what we're seeing? He asks aloud, struggling to grasp the moment. That boy, he might actually have talent beyond anything we imagined. Gunsong, standing beside him, nods slowly. It certainly looks that way. All around them, murmurs rise once more. Whispers filled with doubt, awe, and disbelief. How could an illegitimate child cause such a reaction from weapons of legend? Before the buzz can grow louder, the patriarch raises his voice, cutting through the noise with calm authority. The law is clear, he declares. Every weapon that chooses the young master shall be his. But even as he says it, he knows the situation isn't that simple. To address it, he opens the floor. I will hear suggestions, he says, inviting counsel to resolve the issue. Minister Jaehong steps forward and raises his hand. The patriarch nods. Speak. Jaehong proposes a compromise, granting the boy every weapon would defy the spirit of the steel selection. This ceremony is meant to serve generations, not just one moment. Let him choose only one. The patriarch takes a moment, then agrees. A fair suggestion. We'll proceed with that. And so, Cheol is brought to the center of the ceremonial grounds. The weapons are displayed before him, all glowing, powerful, ancient. This isn't how the ceremony went in his past life, but that only strengthens his resolve. This time, he has a chance to make the most strategic move possible. He begins his walk. One by one, he passes the weapons that stir the awe of every witness. There's the dragon-slaying butterfly of Frach, deadly and elegant. Sacred spears forged from the bones of the holy white whale. Magical staves like Valheim, born from the world tree where spirits sleep. He even passes the celestial sword, created when the sun, boundless, and stars aligned. But Cheol isn't tempted. He's not here to follow expectation. He's here to gain the greatest advantage possible. His steps grow more deliberate as he nears a sword barely noticed by others, a relic left untouched, a blade buried in dust. The moment his father sees where Cheol is heading, his eyes narrow with recognition. The Black Twilight Sword, discovered long ago by the founder of the clan in uncharted lands, it has remained a mystery. No one, not ancestor nor descendant, has ever awakened it. Though classified among the heavenly ranked weapons, its powers remain unverified. Many believe it only sits among them as a symbolic piece, not a true weapon of power. And yet, Cheol is walking straight toward it. The patriarch watches in silence, unsure. Is this just a child's whim? Or is there something far deeper at work here? Father Taishin lifts Young into his arms, his voice firm as he declares, "This is surely divine will." The boy had made his choice, and the Black Twilight Sword had chosen him in return. A sword tied to the great ancestor himself. With that, the steel selection ceremony came to a close. Watching from a distance, Lady Beck's gaze sharpens. "That illegitimate child will be a problem," she mutters. "And if he ever dares to stand in my way, I won't hesitate to remove him." 9 years pass. Young grows up within the walls of the Marshall Lee clan's palace. One quiet morning, he tells his caretaker that he plans to train in the afternoon. She offers to accompany him, but he shakes his head. "I'll go alone," he says with confidence. She frowns. "Why go by yourself? The first training ground isn't that spacious, and it's usually empty." Young replies calmly, "Because someone's waiting for me." Their conversation is suddenly cut short by a scream echoing from deeper within the training grounds. The caretaker glances in the direction of the 7th area. Someone's over there. Sure enough, in the 7th training ground, a young girl is in the middle of a session. Her instructor scolds her gently, warning that if she keeps gripping the sword like that, she'll end up hurting herself. That girl is Liwa. As Young and his caretaker arrive, it becomes clear the scream came from her. The caretaker leans down and whispers to Young, "You should address her properly. Call her your elder sister." Young mumbles in annoyance. "We're barely 5 months apart. Why do I have to speak like she's a decade older?" They stay quiet and watch the lesson unfold. The instructor advises her to treat the sword like part of her own body, urging a firm but careful grip to avoid injury. But why isn't having it? She snaps back, frustration boiling over. "Enough with the criticism. What matters is how I fight, not how I hold the sword." The instructor remains calm, encouraging her to try again and assuring her he still believes in her progress. Curious, Young turns to his caretaker. "Who's that instructor?" "That's Beck Lee-hyun," she replies. "He's from the Ebony Division." Young raises an eyebrow. He seems too skilled to be training a 9-year-old. His caretaker reacts with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Don't worry. You'll be assigned someone fitting your ability soon, too." Then, unexpectedly, tears well up in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I know I haven't taken care of you the way I should have. I've done my best, but someone like Lady Hua, she grew up with the best food, proper support." Her voice trails off. Overcome by guilt, she can no longer hold back. Young gently stops his caretaker mid-sentence. "You don't need to keep saying that," he tells her, his voice calm. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I don't need fancy instructors." He looks ahead, eyes steady. "We came to this clan because of its martial strength. Not for me, not for comfort." Then he reveals something else. He's already found his own path. In the first training grounds. Unlike the other areas, this one is reserved and quiet, filled with relics of the clan's long-standing legacy. Ancient weapons line the space, giving it more the air of a museum than a place for daily practice. But Young knows why it exists. Here lie the weapons of old, the ones that built the clan's name in martial arts. He scans the room, finally spotting an aged sword resting in a quiet corner. He steps forward, takes it in his hand, and begins his routine. He's not here for show. This sword for now will do just fine. As he moves through his drills, thoughts swirl in his mind, especially about the last 9 years since his return to the past. So much had changed, but nothing surprised him more than the strange ability he'd gained, the power to read memories hidden within weapons. He focuses. The sword responds. Flashes of motion, of technique, of ancient battles. It all unfolds in his mind. These memories become his teachers, more effective than any living instructor. He absorbs every detail, refining his foundation. He knows the fundamentals are the core of mastery, and the more distinguished the weapon, the deeper and clearer the memories it holds. In the years that follow, Young trains relentlessly. He deciphers memory after memory, and after 2 years of disciplined effort, he finally masters the 7-star sword technique, a feat once thought impossible for someone his age. But just as he finishes his practice, a voice speaks from behind him. It's been a long time since anyone's mastered that technique. Young turns. Standing there is none other than Lord Jae-hong, his uncle, a 4th-rank warrior, and though not of direct lineage, a man whose prowess in battle earned him the title of general. In both this life and the one before, he had always stood by Young's side. His uncle steps forward, eyes proud. I see you train here every day. Even when I return late from my duties, you're still here. He pauses, then adds, I know how you've been treated by your siblings, by others. The unfairness, the bias. But don't let it weigh you down. He meets Young's gaze. Rise above it. Prove them wrong. Young calmly says he's doing well, but reminds everyone he's still part of the prestigious Martial Lee clan. He knows full well that earning the clan's respect won't come from words or titles. It has to come from his skill with a blade. That's why he's made up his mind to grow stronger purely by relying on himself. Jae-hong feels proud, but there's a lingering sadness. No matter how much Young achieves, he will always carry the label of an illegitimate child. Pushing that thought aside, he tells Young that the time for his eligibility to receive a name is drawing near. Then, after a brief pause, he admits it may be a bit late to bring up, but he wonders if Young would allow him to serve as his instructor until the naming ceremony. But Young's response catches him completely off guard. He declines without hesitation. Surprised, Jae-hong asks why. What's stopping him from accepting such a personal offer? Young explains that he's fully aware of the rule forbidding him from receiving formal instruction before the ceremony. He doesn't want to cause trouble for his uncle. Jae-hong argues that his other nephews ignore that rule all the time. They train with famous masters, eat special diets, and break traditions without a second thought. But Young remains firm. Just because others ignore the rules doesn't mean he will. He believes those rules exist for a reason. And more importantly, as he said before, he wants to walk his own path, by his own strength. Jae-hong is stunned. To hear words like that from someone not even 10 years old is beyond anything he expected. For a brief moment, Young's expression even reminds him of his oldest brother, the clan leader. Realizing there's no convincing him, Jae-hong sighs and says he now sees how much like his father Young really is, stubborn to the core. He admits there's little he can offer that would be of use to him. Frustrated, but not ready to give up, he still asks if there's anything he can do to help. This is the moment Young had been waiting for. He had hoped his uncle would ask, and now that he has, he's ready. He says yes, there is something. Excited, Jae-hong urges him to speak freely, but his enthusiasm vanishes the moment Young makes his request. He wants access to the clan's secret vault. Not long after, Mr. Jae-hong gets into his car and drives toward a highly secured facility. As he approaches the entrance, a security guard stops him. The guard asks him to state his identity and explain the purpose of his visit. Jae-hong calmly introduces himself as the General Supervisor Jae-hong, stating that he's here for the routine evaluation. Beside him is Mr. Young Lee, the youngest son of the Martial Lee family, joining as an observer to gain some experience. The guard checks his credentials, confirms everything, and grants them access. As the gates slide open, the car rolls forward into the compound. Young puts on an act, eyes wide, mouth slightly agape, playing the part of an eager, curious child. He looks around in awe, making sure his wonder seems genuine. He keeps marveling at the size of the facility, but Jae-hong narrows his eyes and questions whether he's truly that impressed. Young responds with excitement. saying this place holds the clan's most prized treasures. Deep down, he's convinced that once he reaches his goal, he'll uncover exactly what he came for: a legendary weapon and an ancient relic few even know exist. This is no ordinary warehouse. It's the armory of the Martial Lee clan. For treasure hunters and relic seekers, it's a vault of untold wonders. Jaehong explains that the lower levels are where weapons with dangerous histories are kept sealed. Intrigued, Young asks if those weapons are so powerful they could devour their users. Jaehong acknowledges that, saying he knows such weapons well, but warns that wielding one without preparation could destroy both body and mind. When he notices a flicker of worry on Young's face, he asks if he's having second thoughts. But Young stands firm. He's not afraid. Jaehong reassures him that there's nothing to worry about anyway. Young won't be allowed into such hazardous sections. With that, he says he has duties to attend to and will return soon. In the meantime, Young is free to explore at his own pace. Young nods as Jaehong walks away. The moment he's alone, he lets out a sigh and mutters to himself. Playing the part of a naive child is exhausting. Without wasting time, he steps into the elevator and heads down to the lowest level, the weapons tomb. It's a hidden floor, sealed off from the world, home to relics of incredible power and deadly pasts. But Young is here for just one thing: the infinity dagger, also known as boundless. At first glance, it may seem like an ordinary blade, but once charged with magical energy, it can shift, changing size, weight, shape, and every attribute to suit its wielder. In a timeline before he returned to the past, it was Gunsong who discovered this weapon. Thanks to its chaotic power and unmatched adaptability, he earned the name Ever-Changing, the infinite variable. Young remembers clearly that title, Ever-Changing, was the reason his third brother, Gunsong, claimed leadership of the clan instead of their eldest sibling. In the past, after Gunsong rose to power, Young hunted him down and eliminated him, viewing him as too great a threat to be left unchecked. That's all he knows so far. But to make sure history doesn't repeat itself, Young has only one path forward: find the infinity dagger before Gunsong does. The search will be long, but he has no choice. He must examine every weapon in this vault, one by one, until he finds it. An hour passes. He's already checked nearly every dagger-like weapon in the vault, yet none seem to be boundless. Still, he's convinced it's here somewhere. All that's left is to dig deeper and not miss a single detail. As he continues searching, he accidentally bumps into a table, knocking an old weapon off the edge. It hits the floor with a dull clang. Startled, Young turns toward it. The weapon is covered in rust, so much so that it looks more like a corroded scrap than something once forged with intent. How could it have deteriorated to such a degree? But as he steps closer, a powerful surge of energy erupts from the blade, catching him off guard. Before he can even react, the entire world shifts around him. Suddenly, he's no longer in the armory. He's standing in a ruined landscape, death and destruction all around. The bodies of the fallen litter the ground. Chaos reigns. It doesn't take long for Young to realize what's happening. This is a memory sealed within the blade. But this one is different. There's something disturbingly familiar about it, as though he's seen it before, maybe even lived it. Then the pressure shifts. A suffocating force weighs down on the entire scene. The sky trembles as something enormous stirs. Emerging from a blue rift in the sky is a monstrous being, ancient, primal, unstoppable. The apocalypse beast. Young's instincts scream at him to run. Even if this is just a memory, the terror feels too real. There's no winning against something like that. But before he can move, a figure appears behind him. A warrior, clad in ancient armor, with the swift, poised bearing of a samurai. The warrior dashes toward the beast at blinding speed. Young watches, unable to believe what he's seeing. With a single slash, the warrior strikes down the monstrous creature. Just like that, Young's breath catches in his throat. This man isn't just a fighter. He's something else. A demon-slaying warrior. But how? How could one person destroy something so powerful with a single attack? He stares, stunned, his mind racing with questions. Then, something even more shocking happens. The warrior turns and looks directly at him. This shouldn't be possible. The warrior fixes his gaze on Young and demands to know, who is he, and why is he here? But the vision doesn't end there. Without a word of warning, the warrior lunges at Young, declaring that he'll end his life swiftly and mercifully. There's no hesitation in his strike, no question in his voice. Young cries out, caught in the path of the incoming blow. And in the blink of an eye, he's back. The rusted dagger slips from his fingers, clattering to the ground. He stands frozen, his body trembling uncontrollably, still gripped by the echo of what just happened. He can hardly breathe. That vision wasn't just a memory. It felt real. Too real. As if he truly stood on that battlefield. As if the warrior's blade had almost touched him. Staring at the weapon, he notices something different now. The dagger. It's no ordinary relic. He picks it up again, more certain than ever. This is it. Boundless. Without hesitation, he pricks his hand with the blade, letting his blood run down its edge. The dagger glows, a brilliant light erupting from it before calming once more. It has accepted him. Energy still humming through his veins, Young tests the blade, striking, moving, slicing through the air. He mimics techniques he's seen in sword manuals, mimics the form of masters. Each swing builds his confidence. By the time he finishes, there's no more doubt. The weapon is boundless, the legendary Infinity Dagger. And now it's his. A week passes. Young continues to train non-stop, pushing himself to master the dagger's shifting nature. He disguises it as a simple ring on his finger, hiding it from anyone who might be watching. But his thoughts keep drifting back to the warrior in the memory. The way he moved, the stance, the power, the sheer elegance of that final blow. Young remembers it clearly, yet something remains out of reach. He knows the technique's name. He knows its form, but the deeper truth behind it still escapes him. No matter how many times he tries to copy it, he fails. The flow, the balance, the control, it's unlike anything he's ever learned. Still, he's not discouraged. Before he rewound time, he was only half talented. He couldn't even master the basics of his clan's techniques. So, for him to now chase an advanced, transcendent combat style, it's a challenge like no other. And that's exactly why he won't stop. This is the first time he's ever encountered something of this level. And he was the only one close enough to the warrior to remember how he moved. That memory, that technique, it belongs to him now. A sudden realization strikes Young. He's not like the seasoned warrior he glimpsed in boundless memories. That man was a fully grown adult. Young is just a 9-year-old boy. Expecting himself to mimic the movements of an adult is unrealistic. No wonder he's been struggling to unleash his full potential. With that in mind, he shifts his approach. Rather than forcing a technique meant for someone older and stronger, he adapts it to match his own physique. Slowly, smoothly, and with measured control, he closes his eyes and concentrates, drawing in his focus and energy. His grip on the sword becomes natural, and his movements begin to flow, graceful, calm, and deliberate. After countless repetitions, something finally clicks. He lands a powerful strike, the kind that feels right down to the core. It's not just a move, it's a glimpse of real strength. For the first time, he feels like he's tapping into something genuine. But there's still one obstacle: his inability to harness magical energy. Despite learning a circulation technique ages ago, he's never been able to get it to work. Something vital is still missing. Without that magical flow, he can't execute energy-based techniques properly. Frustrating as it is, there's no other path but to persist. Just as he resumes his training, a girl appears behind him, sword in hand. She asks where he learned that move. He turns, confused, trying to place her. Her jet black hair and amber-colored eyes immediately give her away. She's clearly from the Martial Lee clan's main bloodline. She reacts with mild surprise, unsure if Young genuinely doesn't recognize her or is just pretending. Then she laughs it off, teasing that it wouldn't be too surprising. She rarely shows herself anyway. Taking a step closer, she asks for his name. He answers, and she chuckles at how distinctive it sounds before introducing herself, Lee Jianga. In that moment, it hits him she's his youngest aunt. His uncle had mentioned her once, before he turned back time. Jianga asks him again, where did he learn that technique? This time, Young asks why she's so curious. She explains that what he just used is an ancient martial style called ancient martial arts, a technique she's especially fond of. She goes on to explain that, in this era, powerful magical beasts still roam freely. Reaching into her clothes, she pulls out a weathered book and offers it to him as a gift. Young blinks in surprise, but accepts it, then asks what's inside. She simply tells him to open it and find out. As Young flips through the pages, he realizes it's a handwritten journal, though the handwriting is a mess. Still, the contents are intriguing. It talks about magical techniques, some so advanced they're hard for him to wrap his head around. There's also high-level combat theory scattered throughout, leaving him wondering if the rumors about his aunt being a bit eccentric might have been wrong all along. Just then, Jayanga points to a section and explains that these ancient magical techniques rely on something called magical pathways. Back then, magic had to be channeled through internal routes in the body. But in the current era, things have changed. Magic is now stored within the heart and then released outward. She challenges the modern mindset, asking if it's really wise to dismiss ancient practices as obsolete. In fact, she believes the magic of the past might have been more advanced. She's been diving into studies of magical amplification and transformation, trying to recover lost knowledge, but she's still short on references. That piques Young's interest. Her research sounds eerily similar to the magic that man used, which was in boundless memory. He asks her to wait a moment, then turns his attention back to his sword, thinking through everything again. He visualizes how magical energy flows from its source through the body, and then he notices something crucial. The energy doesn't cycle back. It just spreads outward. That's the missing piece. The key is to circulate it entirely through the magical pathways instead of forcing it back to the source. This was the part he couldn't grasp before when watching the warrior in Jean's memories. Now it makes sense. He tests it again, and this time his sword strike surges with power. The difference is instant and undeniable. His entire body feels the change, and the result stuns him. Jayanga is just as surprised. She steps closer and asks if he truly understands what he just did and how he pulled it off. Was this really the same technique he's been training with? And how did he manage to master it so quickly? Young doesn't answer directly. Instead, he asks why he should share that kind of information. She doesn't flinch. She reminds him that it was the notebook she gave him that got him this far. She spent her whole life chasing after ancient martial knowledge, even after being cast out of the family. 10 years of searching, and now she's finally found someone who can make sense of it. So she offers him a deal. If he tells her, she'll do anything he asks in return. Young agrees, but only under 3 conditions. First, she must never speak of him, or anything involving him, to anyone else, unless he personally allows it. She agrees without hesitation, but wants to know, why all this secrecy? Young calmly explains his reasoning. He simply hates when people speak about him without understanding. That's why his first condition is secrecy. Then, he lays out the second. From this point on, there must be no more lies between them. Trust, he says, can only grow if they're honest with each other. In return, he promises to share the truth with her whenever possible. Jayanga agrees to that as well, then asks what the final condition is. Young pauses, thinking it through, then begins to carefully explain the last part of his request. A year later, Young is out in the courtyard, focused on his training, when his caretaker approaches. Aunt Jayanga is with him. Young looks up and immediately asks why she's come to the training grounds. She hands him a sealed envelope and tells him it arrived earlier that day. He accepts it without surprise, almost as if he had been expecting it. Jayanga, however, has no idea what's inside. Opening it, Young finds a formal summon. It outlines the instructions for the upcoming naming ceremony. But something catches his eye immediately. The seal and signature aren't from his father. They belong to Li Myongjiango. That's unusual. Young hadn't heard anything about being assigned to a mission or ceremony recently. When Jayanga finds out the letter is about the naming ceremony, her mood shifts instantly. She's furious. Young, confused by her strong reaction, asks why she's so upset. She tells him plainly, things have only just started to settle down for them. If he goes through with the naming ceremony, he'll be officially bound to his role and won't be able to walk away freely. She urges him not to attend at all. Young understands why she's reacting this way. They had made a pact to study magic together and unravel the mysteries behind it. They had been comparing ancient magical methods, which focused on the magical core, with modern techniques that emphasized magical pathways. Their goal was to merge the two, using the core to store and reshape magical energy while directing and activating it with pathways. Through this fusion, Young had already gained abilities far beyond those of others his age. But now, Jayanga fears losing that progress. Still, Young knows the stakes. Ignoring the ceremony would come with serious repercussions. So, he tries to reason with her. He assures her that he must attend, but she doesn't need to worry. Their magical research will continue. His training won't stop, and their mission to restore ancient magical arts will move forward, even if their time together becomes a little more limited. Jayanga isn't convinced. She asks how Young plans to manage both ancient and modern training when the naming ceremony alone will leave him with barely any free time. Young answers confidently. He'll study modern magic as required, but won't abandon his research into ancient techniques. He assures her again, there's no reason to worry. With that, his special training begins. On the first day, Instructor Jang Wook announces the session will start with a half hour of enduring magical attacks. Young braces himself. Things are already different from before, just as he expected. Back then, as the 9th child with no formal training, he would have been on the ground in seconds. But now, he's standing firm, using magic to shield himself with ease. The instructor notices. Young isn't just surviving. He's brushing off attacks like a child's play. What's even more surprising is that while doing this, he's analyzing the 8th trainee, assessing her technique, and gauging how well her prior lessons have paid off. All this from a boy not even 10, born outside the main bloodline? It defies logic. At this point, even calling him an illegitimate child feels ridiculous. Instructor Jang Wook watches in silence, thinking hard. This training was meant to prepare them for the naming ceremony, yes, but also to pass down generations of knowledge. And now, one of their youngest and least expected candidates is outshining them all. It's enough to make anyone reevaluate their assumptions. By the end of the day, after hours of magical resistance training, Young is utterly drained. Still, he can't help but reflect on the madness of his clan, who puts a 10-year-old through lightning-based torture and calls it building resistance. What surprises him more is when the instructor actually apologizes for the harsh evaluation, and he begins to notice something else. The way people look at him now, it's not quite the same as before. There's a hint of recognition, maybe even respect. He gets ready to leave, eager for rest, only to be interrupted. Hua appears suddenly and attacks. Young blocks her strike without flinching. She says she needs to speak with him. He tells her to make it fast. He has no time to waste. That sets her off. Furious, she snaps that he should watch his mouth. She's the legitimate daughter, while he's nothing but an outsider. Young doesn't react. He simply turns away, uninterested. I don't have time for you, he mutters as he walks off. Hua, unable to contain her rage, lashes out with magic. Young dodges effortlessly, grabs her by the collar, and stops her in her tracks. He looks her straight in the eye and says coldly, if you want to cry about it, go cry to your mother. Just don't waste my time with your drama. Frustrated, Young turns and walks away, but Hua calls out again. Her voice cuts through the air, laced with resentment. She tells him that ever since the sword possession incident at the steel selection ritual, everything has changed for her. Because of him, she's constantly compared and judged. It's been nothing but pressure. She barely sleeps, eats next to nothing, and spends every waking moment training. Meanwhile, all Young had to do was be born with talent. Young stops and glances back. His response is sharp. Blaming others is easy, he says. You said it yourself. I'm just an illegitimate child. I don't even have the luxury of shifting blame. If you can't sleep, stay awake. If your diet's holding you back, stop eating altogether. And if you hate me, then use that. Train harder, get stronger, and beat me. He pauses, his tone cold. If you want an apology for everything I just said, take it from me. That's how things work in the Martial Lee clan. While fury boils over, she declares that she will surpass him at the naming ceremony. She'll humiliate him, make him kneel, and beg her for forgiveness, as his elder sister. Young meets her gaze calmly. I'll be waiting, he says. Let's see if you can make that happen. Elsewhere, in the 7th training area reserved for direct descendants of the clan, Lady Beck arrives. She tells the servants to leave. She wants to speak with her daughter alone. Walking into the hall, she finds Hua training by herself. Why are you here alone? Lady Beck asks. Hua turns, recognizing her mother's voice. Just training, she replies quietly. Lady Beck doesn't waste time. Is it true? Were you really beaten by the illegitimate son? Hua stays silent. Her mother presses on, reminding her of what she had said long ago. If she couldn't control him, she needed to crush him. And if all this training is just to avoid punishment, she can stop. There won't be any more. But Hua shakes her head. This isn't about punishment anymore. I know what you think of my training, she says. But this time, I'm doing it because I want to. I want to defeat him. Not because you told me to. Because I need to prove it to myself. Lady Beck narrows her eyes. You've been influenced, she says coldly. That illegitimate boy has no proper foundation for his skills, and yet you let him affect you. She reminds Hua that she's part of the main lineage of the Martial Lee clan. He isn't. Beating him should be natural. But clearly, something about him has shaken her, and now that's fueling her fire. After a moment of silence, Lady Beck reaches into her robes and pulls out a small bottle filled with a dark liquid. She hands it to Hua and tells her plainly, "This is dreamlike trance, a deadly poison. If surpassing the illegitimate son proves impossible, there's still another path. Eliminate him." That, she reminds her daughter, is the true doctrine of the Marshall Lee clan. Victory above all. Meanwhile, back at Young's residence, his caretaker is reviewing his training results for the week. As she flips through the reports, her expression shifts, especially when she reaches the 14th week. Her eyes widen in surprise. Young is placed first. Young watches her reaction and casually asks what she thinks. "Feeling like your efforts weren't wasted?" But instead of taking credit, she embraces him and says warmly, "I didn't do anything. This was all you. You're the one who worked for it." Suddenly, Aunt Lee Jianga bursts into the room, practically glowing with excitement. She urges Young to come train with her. Young sighs, telling her he's just finished a training session, but she grins and insists, "If you train in magic with me, you won't feel tired at all." He raises an eyebrow. "I've never heard of training that makes you less exhausted." She nods confidently. "That's because you've never trained with me." He agrees to go with her, saying there's something he wants to show her anyway. She turns to ask what it is, but stops mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing as if she already knows. "Wait, does it have something to do with the first star?" Young chuckles and gives a small nod, confirming her hunch. As they walk together, she begins to explain the basics of magical training. The foundation is built on 3 core stages, she says. First is body reinforcement, enhancing strength and resilience. Next is the inner energy stage, where you refine and reshape magical power. Finally, there's the external power stage, where you start manifesting supernatural abilities. But then she adds something else. "The magic I use doesn't follow those exact rules. Even in the first stage, it allows for different forms and versatile effects. That's why it's divided into distinct phases, what I call maturation." She glances over at him and asks if he's still struggling with his magical energy circuit. She had assumed it would take him another year to even begin managing it. Young admits that while he understood everything during study, the actual control was a different story. He almost lost balance between the energy's source and its pathway. She listens and then gently explains, "You don't need to force it. Let it move on its own. Magical energy is like water. It flows. Your body is just the container." She smiles, full of reassurance, and tells him not to rush. Mastery takes time, but she believes in him completely. Then she pulls him into a hug once more, telling him how grateful she is to be here to train with him and to witness his growth firsthand. Young struggles to break free, choking out that she's practically snapping his neck. She finally loosens her grip, and he gasps for air. Without missing a beat, she tells him it's time to start training. He needs to reach the 2nd star in magical energy control. She asks if he realizes the star he's already earned isn't like the typical 1st star. Young nods, saying he's aware of the difference. She then questions him. What skill does he believe he's best at? He pauses, thinking it over, then answers confidently, "Swordsmanship." To his surprise, his aunt shakes her head, clearly unconvinced. Young protests, reminding her she's seen his sword techniques firsthand. She acknowledges his talent with a blade, but tells him there's something in him even greater. Magic. She says his control over magic goes far beyond anything she's ever witnessed. So much so that everything else he's good at fades in comparison. She's tried to teach her unique magic to others, but none have ever come close to what he's achieved. Young is stunned. Before he rewound time, he was constantly criticized for his magical shortcomings. His aunt continues, saying that for someone like him, reaching the 2nd star should be simple. And if he manages that, the naming ceremony will be a breeze. From now on, she'll be teaching him real techniques, so he has to stay sharp and focused. Young promises to follow her lead, but he points to an object beside her and asks what it is. She chuckles, explaining that it's part of their training. Then, without warning, she flings something at him with blinding speed. It grazes his face. "Iron spheres," she tells him. He'll need to learn to channel magic while in motion. Standing still while using magic. Useless. From this moment on, his training for the naming ceremony officially begins. Young forces a smile, bracing himself for what's coming. In the next training session, a new figure steps in, Li Junquan, commander of the Blood Tiger Corps. He introduces himself, announcing that he'll now be in charge of training the children of the Marshall Lee clan. Instructor Lee Junkwon orders Young and Hwa to pick their weapons, whatever they want to use, and bring them back within a minute. The two immediately head out. As they move, Young notices Hwa casting glances his way. He turns to her, asking if there's a problem. Hwa pauses, then denies it. She claims she doesn't want anything from him, but then she asks if he uses a sword. Young, walking ahead, says no. She seems skeptical, saying that from what she's seen, he clearly has some skill with a blade. Once they return, Instructor Junkwon eyes on Young and asks what he's doing. Young replies that he's gathering weapons. The instructor frowns, reminding him that he only told them to bring the one they'll be using. Young explains, these are all part of what he's chosen. The instructor gives him a long look, muttering that he thought Young was smart, but now sees he might just be foolish. Then, with a serious tone, he tells them to remember his words. He's here to teach them vision, not specific techniques or stances. He reveals that the martial Lee clan guards powerful secrets, the Enlightenment, hidden techniques that can only be mastered by awakening the sixth sense embedded deep in their bloodline. From now on, his only task is to help them unlock that sense, and he warns them not to make that task harder. Young and Hwa brace themselves, tension rising. Without warning, Instructor Junkwon launches into an attack, telling them they must not lose consciousness and must focus from the very first strike. His blow lands hard. Young is sent flying, but he recovers fast, trying to block the assault. The instructor watches carefully, impressed by how quickly Young reacts and counters despite the sudden attack. Young, still reeling, is shocked by how brutal the training is from the outset. He steels himself. This time, he won't let the opportunity slip. In his past life, he never had this kind of training. Now he's determined to prove himself. He charges forward, launching an attack of his own on Instructor Junkwon, but then Commander Junkwon slams into him with a surprise hit. Hwa sees an opening while Young is distracted and tries to strike, but he pivots fast and counters with a spear. A whole month flies by. Training under Commander Junkwon is relentless. Young jokes that it feels like their bones are breaking and they're bleeding inside, but he manages to smile through it. This isn't training meant for 10-year-olds, but he's getting used to it. Meanwhile, Hwa finally wakes up after losing consciousness again. Groggy, she asks what happened. Young tells her flatly. She fainted for the 20th time. He grins, adding that he's only blacked out 16 times himself. Just then, Commander Junkwon remarks how impressive Lee Hwa's body is. Despite the brutal training, she's taken heavy hits without sustaining a single serious injury. As for Young, the commander admits he's felt something odd about him since day one. At first, he thought Young was just some naive kid when he showed up carrying an armful of weapons. But the real surprise? He could actually handle them all with real skill. Smiling with growing excitement, Commander Junkwon notes that it's only been a month, yet Young is already adapting to the intensity of the training. He calls out to both Young and Lee Hwa. It's time to continue. The two return to their spots, clearly drained, but the session presses on. Young glances over at Lee Hwa and calls her name. She turns with a scowl, asking what he wants. He tells her he's going to give a signal, and all he needs is for her to block just one of Commander Junkwon's strikes for him. She snaps back, asking why she should bother. He shrugs it off, saying she doesn't have to, but he just wants one clean shot at the commander. Annoyed, but curious, Lee Hwa asks if he's really serious about this plan. Young nods confidently, he's sure. Without hesitation, she moves in on the commander. Young follows behind, silently thinking that he still doesn't stand a chance in a head-on fight. His only hope is to rely on teamwork. Commander Junkwon watches them come at him together. He nods slightly, admitting that it's not a bad tactic. Lee Hwa attacks, but the commander sidesteps effortlessly. He tells her that if the plan were working, she'd have blocked his counter, but she fails miserably. He instantly charges at Young with blistering speed. Young blocks the strike, pushing back the commander's spear. In that brief opening, he shouts to Lee Hwa to attack. She launches herself from above, and in that moment of distraction, Young slips away unnoticed. He tosses his spear aside and draws his sword. Now's the time. There's only one technique that might break through. The Demon Slayer. The ultimate move of the boundless infinite dagger. Commander Junkwon senses something dangerous closing in. Young strikes, but the commander manages to block it with his weapon. But Young isn't done. He channels his strength and unleashes a second, devastating blow. His sword slams into the commander. For a second, Young feels the thrill of landing the attack. But then shock. Commander Junkwon caught the blade with his bare hand. Before Young can react, the commander retaliates, sending him flying through the air. He crashes hard into the wall, the sheer power of the blow leaving him stunned. Commander Junquan claps his hands and tells Young that it's been 37 days since they started training. With a satisfied nod, he announces that Young has successfully awakened his sixth sense. Just then, Hua attempts a sneak attack, but Junquan swiftly counters, landing a clean hit on her. He looks down at the two of them lying on the ground, completely drained, and states bluntly that they're still far from where they need to be. With that, he turns and begins to leave, telling them that training is done for the day. Hua, clearly upset, turns to Young and vents her frustration. She says she trusted his plan, and it failed. But Commander Junquan ignores their back and forth. His eyes are locked on the injury to his hand. He murmurs to himself that even though he used mana, barely any, Young still managed to wound him. It may have been a minor use, but it meant breaking his own rule. More importantly, it showed him that Young has something rare, sharp battle instincts. He knows exactly when to press forward and when to fall back. Grinning to himself, he mutters that someday, the elders of the clan will come to fear this boy. On the 47th day, Li Hua finally awakens her sixth sense. With that, both she and Young officially graduate from Commander Junquan's training. Young uses the remaining time to rest, reflect, and refine everything he's learned, until one day his older brother, Myongjiango, arrives. Myongjiango, the eldest son of Li Taixin, is known across the clan as the Twin Stars, a title earned for being both a two-star mage and a martial artist of equal rank. He's respected, even feared, but to Young, he's simply his brother. The two sit together, and Myongjiango offers a quiet apology. He says he regrets not being more present as an older brother, but his duties have always kept him occupied. Young smiles and says there's no need to apologize. Myongjiango chuckles, saying that even though this is technically their first proper conversation, he feels like he already knows him well. Young replies that even if they have different mothers, he could never fail to recognize his own brother's face. Myongjiango's smile fades. He gently but firmly tells Young not to use the term half-brother ever again. He insists that, to him, there's no distinction. He sees Young as no less than any of his siblings born of the same mother. Privately, Myongjiango reflects that Young seems far too hard on himself, especially for someone who hasn't even been through his naming ceremony yet. Young lowers his head slightly and apologizes, promising not to say it again. Myongjiango chuckles, telling Young there's no need for formalities. After all, they're brothers. Young smiles quietly, thinking to himself how Myongjiango had always treated him with warmth since they were kids. Then Myongjiango pulls something from his pocket, holding out to Young. It's a gift to mark their first meeting. He explains he brought it back from the France University of Mages, a rare medicinal elixir known as ruler's wine. Myongjiango believes Young will gain more from it than he ever could. Young's eyes light up with excitement as he recognizes it immediately. Only 500 milliliters of this elixir are produced each year. He's amazed his brother would give him something so precious. Grateful, he thanks Myongjiango with genuine warmth. But Myongjiango narrows his eyes, sensing something different. He comments that Young seems changed. Curious, Young asks what he means. Myongjiango lets out a laugh, saying that all their other siblings treated him like a rival, but Young feels different, and it's unfamiliar, yet refreshing. Young surprises him with a calm, steady reply. He says Myongjiango is mistaken. As a member of the Marshall Li family, rivalry is inevitable. No one can escape that. With a cheerful grin, Young tells him not to see him as the sweet little brother anymore. Who knows? One day, he might become Myongjiango's greatest rival. Myongjiango bursts out laughing and walks over, placing a firm hand on Young's head. He says he'll be looking forward to that day. Young gazes at his brother, silently vowing to protect him, because out of everyone, Myongjiango had always cared for him the most. A few days later, it's time for the second trial of the Marshall Li family, the naming ceremony. Young and Hua make their way to the blue and red island. With a color, the ground shifts with the mana in the air. This island has hosted the Marshall Li family's naming rituals for generations. Their guard briefs them on what to expect. They'll need to survive on the island for 3 weeks to prove their worth. He hands each of them a device, explaining that it will track their positions. They must wear it at all times, non-negotiable. Once the 3 weeks are over, the test chamber will open 2 days later. With a final word of encouragement, the guard leaves them to begin the trial. Not long after, Hua calls out to Young. She has something to say. Before she can speak, Young grins and tells her she's finally ready to talk. She's caught off guard. She hadn't said a word yet, but Young already knows. He tells her he's known for a while. Ever since their training days, she's been holding something in. Wa suddenly flushes red, flustered by how easily Young saw through her. She stammers, asking how he knew. Young just gives her a puzzled look, silently wondering how anyone wouldn't notice something that obvious. Then, calmly, he tells her to just say whatever she needs to. He promises to hear her out. Wa reaches into her pocket but stops halfway, hesitating. Young asks her what's wrong. She finally pulls out a small vial and reveals that it contains poison. She explains that it only works on children under 15, and if left exposed to air for more than 5 minutes, it completely evaporates. More importantly, it damages a person's mana channels permanently. Young's expression sharpens. He demands to know who gave it to her. But Wa brushes the question aside, saying flatly that she's not going to tell him. Without another word, she tosses the bottle to the ground, shattering it. There's no trace of it left. She looks straight at him and declares that she won't stoop to using something like that. She's going to face him head on, no tricks. Young stands there, taken aback, but Wa presses on. She wants him to give it everything he's got. A smirk spreads across Young's face. He tells her she didn't need to say any of that. He was already planning to take the trial seriously. Wa hoists her bag and asks if he's brought everything he needs. She reminds him that once he gets used to the terrain, he should head straight to the island's center. That place, she warns, is incredibly dangerous. Young shrugs, replying that he knows. Then, with a teasing grin, he asks if she's worried about him. She scoffs, rolling her eyes. Worry? Not a chance. The only thing she's concerned about is him dying before they can settle things properly. Just then, a loud noise rumbles through the area, putting them both on alert. Wa repeats her warning, telling him firmly, don't die, no matter what. Then she turns and walks ahead. Young watches her go, remembering the moment he told her that he wasn't planning to stay in the outskirts. His eyes light up with anticipation. Finally, he declares, it's time. Time to head to the heart of the island. From a distant vantage point, the Marshall Lee family elders watch silently. One of them comments that Wa has surpassed expectations. She's already completed the required monster hunts. Despite this being her first real combat trial, she's taken down a large number of enemies. Another elder nods, saying that from someone of her background, such performance was expected. Without a doubt, she's more than qualified. He turns to Commander Junquan, asking how long it took Wa to awaken her sixth sense. Junquan answers plainly, just 47 days. The elder is visibly surprised. She was expected to take at least 2 full months to complete the awakening process. Though caught off guard, the elder admits to himself that Wa is exceptionally gifted, but she didn't reach that level on her own. Someone helped her accelerate her progress. That someone was none other than Young, the ninth son. The elder then shifts his focus and inquires about Young's current status. Commander Junquan reports that Young appears to be searching for a place to set up a hiding spot. This immediately sparks outrage among the elders. They accuse him of cowardice, unable to fathom how someone with Lee blood could behave so shamefully. One even scoffs that such behavior is beneath the family's name. Myeon Jiango speaks up, defending Young. He explains that scouting for a safe base in such a treacherous environment is a smart tactical move, not something to be looked down on. But the elders dismiss his reasoning. While technically correct, they claim their expectations were skewed by Wa's performance. One of them bitterly adds that being mediocre in the Marshall Lee family is the greatest offense. To them, Young is doing nothing special, just what anyone could manage, far from what's expected of their bloodline. Myeong Jiango's patience snaps. He fires back, asking when a family became so cold as to ridicule a child for his background. Still, he can't help but feel puzzled. Why would Young head toward the island's center of all places? It doesn't make sense. Even his uncle, Jae-hong, seems uneasy about Young's choices. Meanwhile, Young finally settles on a location. He burns natural herbs to keep away pests and seals the entrance with tree leaves, camouflaging the area expertly. The elders, watching from afar, admit his stealth skills are impressive, but then they fall silent in disbelief. Young removes his tracking device, lays it on the ground, and covers it with herbs to fully conceal it. Commander Junquan bursts into laughter, remarking that predicting Young's actions is impossible. Young, now alone, mutters to himself that there's no reason to let anyone trace his movements anymore. With that, he declares that he's free to use the boundless infinite dagger however he sees fit. While he's on the island, he needs to make the most of it. Driven by purpose, he heads off and gathers a large batch of herbs. Later, while cooking them, he grimaces and complains. Wild herbs are the absolute worst. Looking at his concoction, he mutters that anyone would think it's just water tinged with a touch of magical greenery. He recalls the harsh days of his past life, when even the cheapest elixir was out of reach. With no other choice, he used a trail behind herb collectors and pharmacists, hoping to stumble upon some magical herbs. His aunt, Li Jianga, had once told him the island was brimming with magical energy, urging him to harness that power through mystical techniques. She claimed that a soup made from enchanted herbs could amplify his abilities, and he took her words to heart. Determined, he brewed the soup himself. But after downing the whole bowl, the taste is so revolting he feels like he might drop dead on the spot. Still, he clenches his fists and says this is just the start of the war, a war that will stretch on for 3 weeks. 11. 18 days into the naming ceremony, the scene cuts to Myong Jiango's office. He's buried in paperwork when a knock interrupts him. A voice apologizes from the other side. Without looking up, Myong Jiango says the expression on the visitor's face already says it all. Bad news. The visitor is Jang Gian, Myong Jiango's trusted assistant. He reports that a large group of nomads has crossed into South Korean land. At first, they thought the group would slip through hidden routes, but instead, they've entered straight through the southern region, and they're now just 2 days from the Marshall Lee family's magical stone mines. Myong Jiango's expression hardens. He says these nomads aren't just wanderers. They're ruthless criminals known for their brutal acts. There's no way they can be allowed to touch Marshall Lee family territory. Jangian goes on to say that although they seem like a disorganized band of nomads, he's convinced someone else is pulling the strings. There's more. New intel shows that Dragon Stronghold has mobilized troops toward the northern border. Dragon Stronghold controls Zhongyuan Giant Organization, a region they share with the Lee family, and they've always used this position to launch attacks. Myong Jiango's eyes narrow. It's clear now. The news of his father leaving the main house has leaked, giving their enemies the perfect opening. He asks if the family's intelligence division knows any of this. Jangian answers that he got the information first. He'd been monitoring the situation under Myong Jiango's direct orders. Myong Jiango nods, then tells him to work with the intelligence division and dig deeper. Something about this doesn't sit right. It feels like there's another layer to all this. He just hopes it's nothing more than instinct. Meanwhile, deep within the island, a glowing magic circle hums to life. From it, a shadowy figure steps out, muttering with a sneer. 2 days more than enough to erase an illegitimate child. The scene shifts to Young, locked in a brutal fight with a 7th-level dragon-blooded beast known as Draco. The creature lets loose a massive surge of flames, but Young dodges swiftly and retaliates without hesitation. He then strikes with the Demon Slayer technique, landing a critical hit that brings Draco down for good. As the dust settles, Young stands still, taking a moment to process what just happened. He acknowledges the overwhelming power these dragon-blooded beasts possess. If he had encountered Draco when he first arrived, he would have been done for. It took him 19 days to reach the dragon's nest, but now he knows it's pointless to stay any longer. As he turns to leave, he reminds himself there's another reason he came here. Then, catching a faint noise from the nearby forest, he drops low to the ground. His suspicions are confirmed. The lizard men have arrived. Something's wrong, though. These creatures usually stay at the island's outskirts, but now they're in the center. Even stranger, they're showing signs of coordination, something totally out of character for them. Known for being dim-witted and weak in combat, their behavior doesn't add up. To test his theory, Young deliberately chops down several trees, letting the crash echo through the woods. Just as he thought, the lizard men panic and scatter at the sound. Smirking, Young mutters that he was right. Something's definitely influencing them. Without wasting time, he charges forward, wiping out the entire group, except one. That one, he lets live, following it silently to see where it's headed. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to another figure, Instructor Nishiyama, who had arrived on the island with Young and Liwa. Watching from afar, he scoffs, calling the Marshall Lee family utterly bizarre. He's baffled that someone as young could take down so many beasts alone. Still, no matter how skilled he is, Nishiyama believes Young is just a kid, and sooner or later, he'll walk straight into the trap laid for him. Confidently, he muses that he probably won't even need to use his backup plan. But Young, observing from a distance, senses something is off. The whole setup feels far too obvious. His instincts scream at him to look deeper, and his doubts pay off. That's when it hits him. Instructor Nishiyama is actually a beast tamer. But a troubling thought gnaws at Young. How did someone from outside the family even step foot on the island? It should have been impossible. The only logical explanation is that a magical circle was used to bring him in. Smirking, Young mutters to himself. If that's the case, then someone from within the family must have helped him. He pauses, weighing his options. Should he report this to the family and wait for reinforcements? No, that would be a mistake. By the time they arrived, it'd all be over. Worse yet, he'd lose his only chance to find out who's really behind this. Left with just one path, he activates his stealth technique, completely erasing his presence. His goal is clear now. Approach Nishiyama silently and take him out with his own hands. But just as he closes in and strikes, a strange bird perched on Nishiyama's shoulder lets out an eerie cry. In that instant, Young realizes the truth. It's not an ordinary bird, but a detection tool designed to sense nearby threats. The sound gives away his position, allowing Nishiyama to react just in time and block the lethal blow. Nishiyama turns, stunned by what he sees. To think an illegitimate child could push me this far, he mutters, clearly impressed. You far surpassed my expectations. Young shoots back with a smirk. The problem isn't that I'm strong, it's that you're laughably weak. Enraged by the insult, Nishiyama commands his beast to attack. But Young stays calm. Drawing his blade, he unleashes the 7-star sword technique, third form, cutting them down with ease. Just as victory seems within reach, he's suddenly caught off guard. Chains whip through the air, binding his sword and locking it in place. He instantly realizes it's a trap, and Nishiyama is the one behind it. Laughing coldly, Nishiyama declares, "You walked right into it. This technique shuts down your magic completely. Without it, you're just a powerless brat. Struggle all you want. It's useless." But Young's gaze doesn't waver. With steady confidence, he replies, "If I can't use magic, then I'll just recover it faster than your cheap trick can suppress it." As the words leave his mouth, his mana surges back. The chains shatter. With one clean motion, he charges at Nishiyama, locking eyes with him just as shock spreads across his opponent's face. Young gives a sly smirk, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he asks if Nishiyama has finally dropped the idea of running or if he's still dreaming of escape. Caught off guard, Nishiyama stammers, demanding to know how Young managed to break through the barrier. But Young stays cold and blunt. He owes no explanations, especially not now, since the clan already knows where he is. There's no point in resisting anymore. He tells Nishiyama to just surrender. But instead of backing down, Nishiyama grins wickedly. He says it doesn't matter what happens. His only goal is to kill Young and win back his freedom. Young, clearly confused, asks what he means by that. But before he can react, a massive shadow looms behind him. A brutal strike lands without warning, hurling him through the air. He crashes hard into a tree, the impact nearly knocking him out. Barely conscious, he raises his head and is stunned by what he sees. Towering above him stands the colossal beast, the supreme monster of Red and Blue Island. A phantom beast of the mountains, it ranks as a third-tier nightmare class, far beyond anything someone like Nishiyama should be able to command. Turning back to Young, Nishiyama sneers. He claims to finally grasp the situation. The beast isn't fully under his control, not yet, but there's one command it will follow without question: kill. He tells Young to stop resisting. There's no way out. But Young quickly understands the one advantage he has. The beast is not completely tamed. If he can take out Nishiyama fast enough, the creature might lose its directive. There's only one problem. To even stand a chance, he has to make a choice he's been dreading. He pulls out a pill, an illegal stimulant with dangerous side effects. The risk is immense, but it's the only shot he has. He swallows it. Instantly, his body surges with mana. His strength skyrockets. And then, he recalls a forbidden technique, one his aunt warned him to use only when death is certain. Now is that time. Channeling all his power, he focuses his mana and launches a fierce strike straight at the colossal beast. The blow hits, but the creature's hide is unbelievably thick. It barely reacts. Undeterred, Young attacks again, this time with more force, more precision. He feels it. He's breaking through. But then, the beast roars, unleashing a wave of magical energy. The surge traps Young in a restrictive field, locking his movements and stopping his advance. But suddenly, Young's dark energy reacts to the magical field, yanking him out of the beast's range and breaking the trap. It's the opening he needs. Wasting no time, he charges forward. First comes the Black Storm technique, ferocious and swift, followed by the demon-slaying Chuma sword strike. The blade cuts deep, cleaving through the massive creature with unstoppable force. The mountain beast lets out a final, thunderous roar, then crashes to the ground, lifeless. Young collapses soon after. The drug's backlash hits hard. His body is burning up from the inside. The mana boost and Heaven's Core technique are tearing him apart. He can barely move. 10 seconds. That's all he has left. The beast's last attack missed, and this is his only shot to take out Nishiyama. Forcing himself up, Young bolts toward his target. Suddenly, he notices a faint red thread stretching through the air. It leads directly to the beast tamer. Without hesitation, he follows it. Nishiyama spots him too late. Shock flashes across his face. He can't believe Young is still alive, let alone tracking him this fast. Young strikes, but it's not enough. He's just a few centimeters short. Time is running out. With what little control he has left, he extends his sword in a final, precise motion, just enough to land the blow. The blade cuts through Nishiyama in an instant. The beast tamer drops. Young crashes down too, barely breathing. Every nerve in his body screams. He fumbles for a small vial tucked in his pocket, a remedy his aunt insisted he take after using the Heaven's Core technique. He drinks, but the pain doesn't stop. His limbs go numb. His vision fades. He tries to fight it, tries to stay awake, but he collapses, helpless as darkness swallows him and distant roars echo in the background. When he opens his eyes, everything is white, pure, endless white. He can't tell where he is. Panic sets in. He tries to move, but his body won't respond. It feels like it's been shattered into fragments. Then a voice, calm, strange, speaks. It marvels at his survival, saying the things he's faced are beyond what any human mind can handle. It wonders aloud. How could two separate beings exist in one body? The voice sounds almost disappointed. It says it had hoped Young would never wake up. That would have made things simpler. But now, it has no choice. It commands him, consume it. Young narrows his eyes, focusing on the object before him. His breath catches. It's a hive stone, but not just any hive stone. It's glowing with a deep, ominous purple. His heart sinks. This is the legendary purple hive core. But the voice quickly corrects him. That's not quite right. It isn't the voice he's meant to consume. It's the stone. The covenant has already begun, and from this moment on, he must grow stronger or be swallowed by time itself. That's when the truth hits him. The voice, the one guiding him in this strange white void, belongs to the very beast he just defeated. The mountain beast. With those final words, the voice fades into silence. Young jerks awake. Standing before him is Wa, arms crossed, scolding him for speaking to her without proper respect. She reminds him she's his elder sister. But then she sighs and lets it slide, considering the condition he's in. She softens and asks if he's feeling any better. Young closes his eyes and checks his internal state. His body is wrecked, muscles torn, bones fractured, and internal organs damaged. But one thing is certain. His magical energy has soared. It really happened. He consumed the purple hive core. He turns to Wa and tells her what he's found. His mana pathways are damaged, his organs bruised, muscles and bones battered, but nothing fatal. He's alive. Still, a thought gnaws at him. That core, it should have been Wa's. A powerful relic known for its miraculous properties, boosting magic, strengthening the body, and shielding its user from curses and toxins. He'd chased it in his previous life, hoping to one day obtain it on Gongchong Island. And now that it's his, guilt creeps in. He asks why she's here. Before she can respond, their eldest brother, Myong Jiango, appears. He strides in calmly, asking if Young's recovering well or if he still needs magical treatment. Without waiting, he hands over a potion. Young shakes his head, saying he doesn't need it, but drinks it anyway. As he sips, his brother watches silently, his face heavy with emotion. Then, turning to Wa, he quietly asks her to give them a moment. She nods, telling them to call her when they're done. Once alone, Myong Jiango looks directly at Young and says if anything had happened to him, he wouldn't have hesitated. Whoever was connected to that beast tamer, no matter who they were, no matter how strong, he would have erased them all. Young is overwhelmed by his brother's words. Gratitude wells up inside him. Myeong continues, saying that while Young may be admired within the martial Lee clan as a model warrior, he can't view things so optimistically as his older brother. What Young did was reckless, plain and simple. Young admits he hadn't expected the mountain beast to appear. If he had, he would have waited for backup. He apologizes for his rash decision. Myeong tells him he needs to learn the difference between confidence and recklessness. Then Young brings up the matter of the beast tamer, saying that now that he's handled the situation, the information should rightfully return to him. Myeong smirks. He figured Young would say that. He begins to explain what happened. The beast tamer, instructor Nishiyama, was actually a 5th-tier mage from Japan's Inyang school. He'd been expelled after attempting to practice forbidden magic. Myeong suspects that those responsible for this attack used high-level spells and magical tools while the beast was in hibernation. Their true goal was to eliminate Young by manipulating the creature. Young then asks if they still haven't pinpointed who orchestrated the plan. Myeong replies that the beast tamer is barely hanging onto life. It's unlikely they'll get any more answers out of him. That revelation stuns Young. He then points out something odd. The real target here wasn't him, but Myeong. Myeong asks why he thinks that. Young explains, the infiltrators got in unnoticed, and the response to their presence was suspiciously slow. That kind of delay only makes sense if someone wanted to damage Myeong's reputation from the inside. Myeong confirms that Young is right, and tells him to act like he knows nothing. When Young asks if there's anything else he should do, Myeong brushes it off, saying he's fine, just a few minor injuries, but he can't stay away from his duties for long without risking disorder. Then Young takes his brother's hand and proposes a deal. Myeong raises an eyebrow, curious about the offer. Young says he'll take full credit for discovering the beast tamer's infiltration, claiming that Myeong was acting on his instructions. He'll back the story completely. This way, it'll look like Young unearthed something even the clan's intelligence division missed. Myeong tells Young that being honest would be better for him in the long run. But Young explains that if he admits to acting alone, it'll only paint a bigger target on his back. People will grow more hostile and suspicious, and no one will gain anything from it. Realizing his brother's reasoning makes sense, Myeong acknowledges that the proposal benefits them both. He then asks what Young wants in return. Without hesitation, Young requests access to the Hall of Prominent Manuscripts for 3 days. That's all the time he needs. Myeong scoffs, calling him an opportunist, but agrees. They shake hands, and Myeong thanks him for the idea. Young shrugs it off. It's just a deal, nothing more. Myeong then admits he never doubted Young had already figured out a way to handle everything, even without him. Before he can say more, his phone buzzes. He checks it, then tells Young the summons is from the Blue Sword Squad. He needs to leave immediately. Before going, Myeong tosses Young the boundless dagger, promising to keep everything between them secret. Young laughs, saying he never expected his older brother to be naive anyway. After Myeong departs, Hwa returns and asks if the talk ended smoothly. Young nods, it went just fine. She then asks which hall he plans to enter, reminding him that 3 weeks have passed and the halls are now open. Young dodges the question, saying she should pick first if she wants an answer. Hwa boldly declares that she'll enter the Hall of Shadows, the most difficult one of all. Then she turns the question back on him. Which hall did he choose? Young responds calmly, the Hall of Struggle. Surprised, Hwa questions whether such a hall even exists, and if it's one of those obscure ones located on the outskirts. Young confirms it is. Disappointed, Hwa assumes she was wrong about him. If he chose some remote hall, then he couldn't be the rival she once believed, maybe not even her equal. She walks away, deciding there's no point in continuing the conversation. Young doesn't stop her. He lets her go without explaining. At daybreak, Young sets out alone. Though he struggles to remember the exact route, he follows his instincts, pushing forward. Somewhere at the end of this rough path lies a hidden cave, the place where he'll face the second trial of the naming ceremony. At first glance, the area looks like nothing more than a solid rock wall. But Young knows better. He draws his sword and strikes, shattering the surface to reveal a massive iron gate concealed behind the stone. He's finally found it, the entrance to the Hall of Struggle. Without hesitation, he uses the boundless dagger to slice his palm, letting his blood drip onto the gate. The door creaks open instantly, granting him access to a vast, desolate chamber that resembles an ancient palace long forgotten by time. He walks through the hall until he reaches the center, where he places his hand into an iron vessel. Loudly and clearly, he announces his identity, a descendant of the Marshall Lee clan, here to take the trial and asking the hall for its permission to proceed. He knows exactly what's waiting for him. This is the coffin of struggle trial. A brutal test where the only path to victory is through defeating himself. There's no limit to the number of attempts, but he cannot leave unless he wins. Surrendering or becoming unable to fight won't end the trial. Just as he takes his first step forward, his duplicate appears out of nowhere and slashes his throat. For a moment, he's stunned, convinced he just died. But his body remains untouched. Though unharmed, the feeling of his throat being cut was real. Terrifyingly real. He realizes it was an illusion. The hall doesn't allow death, but the pain and sensation are so intense that experiencing them again and again could easily break someone's mind. Still, Young wonders if that version of himself could land a blow he couldn't defend against. Does that mean he hasn't yet reached his full potential? After all, the duplicate uses his abilities at their peak. If he truly mastered them, he could have blocked the attack. With that realization, he steels himself and tries again. But he fails, over and over. Each time, he dies, cut down, broken, defeated. On his fifth attempt, he finally manages to parry the sword, only to be killed again, this time by a snapped neck. And the cycle continues, 10, 11, 20 tries, all ending the same way. But Young doesn't stop. He pushes through every defeat, refusing to quit. Around his 75th to 80th attempt, something changes. The battle grows fiercer, but he's no longer falling behind. He starts matching his duplicate's speed and strength. For the first time, he feels like he's beginning to understand. Victory might actually be within reach. Realizing that his true advantage lies in the fluid, unrestricted way he channels magical energy, unpredictable and ever-changing. He leans fully into it. With the endlessly shifting dagger, boundless, in hand, he commits to one goal. This time, he will defeat his double. As their battle drags on, their styles begin to mirror one another more closely with every exchange. Suddenly, the duplicate lands a blow, plunging its blade into his abdomen. But before it can press the attack, Young locks its arm in place, revealing that he had intentionally left himself open. "You're too naive," he says coldly, freezing the duplicate's movement. Channeling all his energy, he prepares his killing move, the Demon Slayer split technique. In one final, powerful strike, he defeats the copy at last. The illusion shatters. After 80 failed attempts, Young finally conquers the trial, causing the false version of himself to dissolve into nothing. This success awakens a long-dormant power tied to the song Muley Bloodline. In his past life, the ability he unlocked was the standard enhancement trait. But now, something is different. Something new stirs within him. Something he's never felt before. Meanwhile, just outside the trial hall, members of the clan gather at the gate. Among them is Uncle Jae-hong, pacing anxiously. He mutters under his breath, upset that the enemy chose today, of all days, the day of the naming ceremony, when everything was supposed to be under control. His thoughts are cut off by a report. The energy around the gate is shifting. It's opening. All eyes turn as Young emerges, clearly drained and barely able to stand. Uncle Jae-hong rushes forward, catching him just in time before he collapses. His breathing is shallow, barely audible. Young whispers for water and food. Uncle Jae-hong stares at him in shock, then lets out a frustrated shout. Not from anger, but from fear. He scolds Young for worrying everyone to death, calling him a cat with 9 lives. Once back home, Young is greeted with a tearful embrace from his caretaker. Her relief is overwhelming. She'd been terrified ever since hearing rumors that he'd encountered a beast tamer in the mountains on top of enduring the ancestral trial. Young, still recovering, replies that he feels filthy. He's been gone for nearly a month without so much as a bath. The caretaker admitted she had planned to scold Young fiercely, but seeing him safe again, all that anger vanished. For now, she was just relieved. She told him a hot bath was ready and that a meal would be waiting once he was done. Young took his clothes and turned toward the bath, but paused. He asked about his aunt, surprised she hadn't appeared yet. Without saying much, the caretaker led him to the place where his aunt was being held. He frowned. Why is she locked up? The caretaker sighed, regret clouding her expression. She was grateful he'd returned safely, but her face tightened when she asked what exactly he'd done to cause such a huge surge in magical energy, especially considering that until recently, he hadn't been able to absorb it at all. Young cut her off, demanding the truth. Caught off guard, she stammered, insisting it wasn't anything major, just a normal incident. But Young wasn't buying it. It didn't make sense that his aunt would go to such lengths over something minor. The truth came out. She'd caused an uproar in the judgment hall. She had stormed in, defying the elders and even challenging Young's older brother. Her accusations were sharp. She blamed them for their stubborn ways and the danger they brought to everyone, especially Young. Ajayanga looked at him and said softly that she was sorry. She just couldn't stay quiet. When she imagined something bad might have happened to him, the thought of losing her disciple, her little boy, was too much. And in that moment, something shifted in Young. Until now, he had never completely trusted her. But now he saw her in a new light. She was family. He promised to get her out soon, but she quickly told him not to worry about it. Even so, he assured her, "You won't be in there much longer." Meanwhile, at the airport, members of the Martial Li clan gathered to welcome their leader. As the plane door opened, Patriarch Li Taishin stepped out, towering and calm. His wife, Beck, approached with a warm smile, telling him she had prepared a relaxing bath and a peaceful dinner. He thanked her and walked on, with Young and Hua silently observing the moment. Standing there, Young couldn't help but feel it. He had grown stronger through the naming trial. But now he could clearly sense just how massive the gap still was between himself and his father. As if reading his thoughts, clan leader Taishin spoke. "In this clan, those who don't fight have no place. Yet among them all, there's only one person bold enough to stand against me." Young understood clearly. His father's words were directed at him. But the others in the hall didn't even consider him a possibility. Instead, they began guessing who the patriarch might be referring to. In the grand banquet hall of the Martial Li clan, the rare naming ceremony was in full swing. The clan wasn't known for throwing events like this, making the celebration feel all the more significant. For Young, it was also a rare chance to mingle with important guests, including the master of the magic tower and the head, or possibly deputy, of the Inyan division. As the festivities continued, a servant quietly approached Young and delivered a message. The patriarch was summoning him. Personally, startled, Young's first reaction was unease. A personal summons from his father could only mean something serious. He followed the servant and soon arrived at the designated room. Bowing in respect, he asked whether his father had truly called for him. But what caught him off guard wasn't the confirmation. It was the presence of his older brother, Myong Jiango, standing silently beside their father. Patriarch Taishin didn't waste words. "You already know why you're here," he said. He went on to explain that based on Myong Jiango's testimony from the naming ceremony, he had detected and captured an intruder. Then, looking straight at Young, he asked whether it was him who had reported the matter, and whether he was the one who suggested the intruder's arrest. Young paused. He had already guessed that his father knew everything. Nothing could be hidden from him. So, calmly, he confirmed it. Yes, it was his suggestion. In return, he had negotiated with Myong Jiango access to the old book hall for 3 days in exchange for handling the fallout from the incident. His father gave a curt nod. "I'll overlook the false report this once. Your involvement led to the capture, after all. But don't test my patience again." Young bowed slightly, apologizing and promising to remember the lesson. Then the patriarch turned to Myong Jiango. "You'll receive your punishment later. For now, take charge of the banquet." After that, the clan leader addressed Young again. Despite the deception, he acknowledged that Young had made a meaningful contribution. As such, he could collect the reward Myong Jiango had promised. And in light of Young's discovery of the coffin of struggle, he would also be granted a special reward, one of his own choosing. Young accepted and said he would claim it soon. With that settled, clan leader Taishin returned to the banquet hall and stood before the crowd. He offered his thanks to all who had traveled far to attend and gave a blessing in the names of the 2 young ones at the heart of the ceremony. Then came the official start of the naming. He first called Hua to the front. Addressing her, he spoke of the heavenly sword, an artifact of brilliance that had chosen her. He said she had always walked the path of light with unwavering resolve. For that reason, she would now be known as Seo Yun, blessed radiance, so that her journey would forever shine. Overjoyed, Hua bowed and thanked the clan leader for the honor of her new name. Then it was Young's turn. As he stepped forward, the hall fell silent. The clan leader looked at him and spoke with firm conviction. "You are strong, yet precise. Steady, yet unbending. Like iron forged in fire, you've endured and reshaped yourself over time. No name suits you better than this." And with that, Young was given the name Chiol, meaning iron. As the name echoed through the hall, Young felt a wave of familiarity. He had been given this name once before, in another life, as a symbol of unbreakable resolve. But now, the name felt different, like a challenge, a promise to surpass all limits. And that thought fueled him even more, sharpening his will to rise to the very peak of the martial Lee clan. Meanwhile, in another part of the compound, Aunt Jyonga was in no mood for silence. Still bound, she yelled at the top of her lungs, demanding to be let out. The walls were closing in, and she hated the idea of missing Young's naming ceremony. Moments later, the guards approached with new orders. Her confinement had been lifted, for now, and her final sentence would be decided later. She didn't wait a second. Practically bursting out of the chamber, she rushed forward, only to be stopped by Young himself. She blinked. Did you get me out?" He nodded. "Yes." Surprised, she asked how. Instead of answering, he simply handed her a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "You owe me now," Young replied with a smirk. As she read the document, her eyes widened. It stated that she had been officially reassigned, under the authority of the Ancient Council, as a mentor. Young had named himself her disciple. That was the loophole he used to free her. Stunned, she looked up at him, speechless. He smiled again. "So, I'll be counting on you. Teach me well." 3 years passed. Now 13, Young stood in his training uniform, ready for the next stage of his journey. The caretaker watched with misty eyes, amazed by how quickly time had flown. Young smiled and reassured her. "I'm heading out now." He made his way to the Student Training Academy, standing before its gates with a firm gaze. "It's finally time," he said to himself. "This is where it begins." Inside the academy, whispers spread fast as he walked in. "That's him, right? From a naming ceremony?" "Yeah, the one who stirred up that chaos. Just lucky, if you ask me." "Lucky," someone scoffed. "Did you see his performance?" "That wasn't luck. I want to see what he's really capable of." And just like that, all eyes were on Young again. Hearing all the talk around him, Young grows irritated. Everyone seems to have something negative to say about him. Just then, Hua arrives, and the students around can't help but comment on how different she feels from Young. She carries the presence of someone from the main family, and the contrast in how everyone reacts to her entrance compared to his is impossible to ignore. Hua walks up to Young and greets him. He replies politely, saying it's been a while. Looking a bit unsure, Hua brings up the past, asking if he's still bothered by what happened during the naming ceremony. Young seems confused at first, so she reminds him she once told him she was disappointed in him. Young casually shrugs it off, saying it didn't bother him. He never dwelled on it. Hearing that, Hua lets out a small sigh of relief, admitting she was worried he might have taken it too seriously. But her relief is short-lived when Young snaps back, questioning whether she's trying to say he's overly sensitive. Quick to avoid an argument, Hua changes the topic, mentioning she heard he's been training under Aunt Lee Jyonga and even got access to the family library. Before they can continue, the instructors arrive and call for attention, signaling the start of class assignments. One by one, names are read aloud. Students are instructed to step forward and join their designated groups. The atmosphere grows tense. Young knows why. They'll be stuck in these classes for the next 3 years. Placement here isn't just symbolic. It decides everything. There are 5 classes in each year, with the most skilled assigned to the top ones. Hua, unsurprisingly, is placed in Class 1. Young barely reacts. It's exactly what he expected. Then his own name is called. He walks over to receive his assignment. As he descends the stairs, he catches the instructor's look of disdain. He's not even trying to hide it. Young mutters under his breath. He figured there might be some politics involved, but this is just blatant. He's been tossed into Class 5, the so-called garbage class. According to the system, direct bloodline members are placed based on their performance in the naming ceremony, judged by the Education Institute under the Senate and Lady Beck's faction. Clearly, someone pulled strings. But instead of getting angry, Young smirks inwardly. They probably think they've cornered him, but this actually plays right into his hands. Less attention, less pressure. The instructor gives directions to the class location. Young simply responds, "I know where it is," and heads off without another word. Just as Young turns to leave, something catches his eye. Hua, standing there with a red aura swirling around her, a clear sign of her fury. She's fuming inside, thinking he should have at least stood up for himself. Young realizes she might even try to get involved if he stays silent. Still, he doesn't see the point. Without another glance, he walks off with the rest of the students assigned to Class 5, most of whom are still grumbling, clearly anxious about how they'll explain their placements to their families. As they head toward their new class, one student approaches Young. He asks if Young is really the youngest son of the main family. Young confirms it, prompting the boy to introduce himself as Kim Han. He shares that his father runs a small blacksmith workshop and says he's proud to be in the same class as Young. But Young thinks back. He doesn't remember anyone named Kim Han from his past life. Curious, he asks why Kim Han chose to speak to him. Kim Han explains that Young is well known, someone he looks up to. From his tone, Young can tell the admiration is genuine. He then asks Kim Han how he feels about being put in the lowest class. Kim Han just laughs, saying it only reflects his current level, nothing more. But then he grins, adding that the future is always full of surprises. Young finds his attitude refreshing and tells him he respects his mindset. Soon, they arrive and are greeted by some senior students who welcome them warmly. Once the introductions are out of the way, the instructor calls for attention. He introduces himself as Lee Jiango and announces that he'll be leading the 5th class. Since it's the first day, he says they'll start with an orientation rather than jumping into training. Young quietly observes Lee Jiango and notes that the man hasn't changed, still full of energy and purpose. He was Young's instructor in his past life too. After going over the basics, instructor Lee Jiango hands things over to one of the older students, a guy named Inha. Looking a bit sheepish, Inha admits he's repeated the first year twice, which is why he's now the class leader again. He then jokes that they've been standing long enough. Anyone who wants to sit should go ahead. He starts explaining that one of their first tasks is to choose a class leader. While they're students, they'll still be sent on assignments, and the leader is expected to guide the team during those missions. He clarifies that the class leader won't handle training. That's strictly under the instructor's domain. Just then, a student raises a hand and asks how the leader will be chosen. Inha responds that he's not sure how the other classes do it, but in Class 5, they settle things with a competition, and after that, the students vote on who should be the leader. Without wasting time, he announces that the matches will begin immediately. The goal is to test physical strength, so no magic is allowed, and everyone will get rest between rounds. But Young doesn't look thrilled. In fact, he looks outright annoyed. Inha notices and asks what's wrong. Young replies bluntly that everything Inha has said so far has been irritating. He grabs a sword and walks forward, stating that they're in the Marshall Lee family. This isn't some average academy. If Inha wants to play schoolyard games, he should have gone somewhere safer. Inha, taken aback, says Young's words are way too harsh. He only wanted to handle things without unnecessary conflict. But Young's glare sharpens as he declares that words won't work on people like them. The only language they seem to understand is force, so he dares them to step up, one by one. With that, the competition kicks off. One after another, the students challenge Young, and every single one is defeated in an instant. Inha watches in disbelief. He's beaten most of these students before, yet they're falling like leaves against Young. The atmosphere shifts as Young suddenly calls out Inha's name. There's no mistaking it, he's next. Inha swallows hard. He feels the pressure from Young's aura. It's overwhelming. With a hesitant voice, he says there's no one else left. He's the last one. Young smirks, then steps forward. The final match begins. Inha can't help but wonder why Young is going this far. There's no prize, no audience. What's the point? But as they trade blows, something inside him stirs. He starts to understand. He says aloud that he's gotten used to disappointment. He used to think giving up was just another way to move forward, that accepting one's limits was how a boy became a man. But even so, he wants to win this time. Inha attacks with everything he has, but Young dodges with ease. Inha continues, admitting that he once believed surrender was just part of life, a sign of maturity. But now he wants more than that. He wants victory. Before he can say anything else, Young suddenly closes the distance and strikes. The force of the blow knocks Inha's sword clean out of his grip. The match is over. Inha hits the ground, wincing in pain, clutching his injured hand. Young steps toward him and calmly tells him to go see the nurse. But Inha isn't done yet. Grimacing, he pushes himself back up, grabs his sword with his uninjured hand, and charges forward, shouting that the fight isn't over. Young raises an eyebrow. He hadn't expected Inha to switch hands. There's something different in his eyes now, a new intensity. But even with that fire, Inha can't land a hit. Young counters again, pushing back his blade, and then delivers a crushing blow to Inha's stomach. Inha drops to the ground for good this time, unable to move. Young orders the other students to carry him to the nurse. Then he turns to face the rest of the class. Raising his voice, he speaks clearly and firmly. Anyone who doesn't understand that surrendering sometimes makes life easier won't last. If you give up before the fight ends, you've already lost. That's why he fights, always, to protect not just himself, but everyone around him. He looked around at them and asks, have any of you ever truly lived like that? Because to him, that's what real struggle is. Later, instructor Lee Jiango walks up to him, clearly displeased. He says Young went too far. 4 students now have fractures, and 3 more are suffering from internal injuries. But Young doesn't flinch. He answers that anyone who wants to survive in the Marshall Lee family can't be concerned with a few injuries. Lee Jiango tries to reason with him, saying each student has their own life and struggles. That's when Young snaps. He shouts back, asking if he really needs to explain something the students have already learned for themselves. Then he looks straight at Lee Jiango and says he's a rare kind of person in the Marshall Lee family, kind and good-hearted. But even so, Young makes it clear, if these students lose their way, he won't hesitate to become the villain they need to get them back on track. Before walking away, he tells instructor Lee Jiango to do his job properly. The next day, Young makes his way to the academy, trying to stretch and ease the soreness from yesterday's fights. His body aches from the effort, but he pushes through it. When he arrives, all the students are there, standing in front of him. They're still bruised and bandaged, clearly still recovering. Some look frustrated. Some look ready for a rematch. But not one of them avoids his eyes. In that moment, he realizes something important. If they were still as timid as they had been yesterday, he would have given up on them completely. But now he feels a sense of hope. Just then, Kim Han walks up to Cheol. Cheol notes that he's here early. Kim Han explains that he was worried. After all, he's the only one who had shown Cheol his vulnerability. Cheol tells him that it's perfectly normal. He's still a student, still growing. Kim Han, then, says he has a question. Cheol encourages him to ask freely. Without hesitation, Kim Han wants to know what it takes to become as strong as Cheol. But Cheol humbly replies that he's not in a position to teach others yet. Still, he acknowledges Kim Han's natural feel for combat. Kim Han seems confused, so Cheol elaborates. During their spar yesterday, Kim Han managed to dodge 3 of his attacks in a row. That kind of instinct can't be taught. Cheol tells him that if he leans into that combat sense and focuses on sharpening his technique instead of just relying on raw power, he'll grow much faster. With dedication, he'll become a completely different person. Just then, someone else walks up. Cheol turns to look, and it's Inha. His arm's in a cast, and he's covered in bruises. Cheol immediately comments on his condition, pointing out that he clearly isn't in shape to train right now. But Inha pushes back. He asks Cheol if he would sit out in the same situation, implying that someone like Cheol would keep pushing through. He even says he'd feel ashamed if he quit, thinking Cheol might look down on him. Inha then makes it clear he's here because he never wants to hear Cheol say what he said to him yesterday ever again. Cheol can't help but smile inwardly. Ha has changed completely. Right then, Coach Lee Jiango calls everyone together. He announces that 4 students have excused absences, but 5 didn't even bother to show up. That leaves only 11 of them. Looking around, he notices how worn out they all seem. Still, there's something different in the air. The mood has shifted, all because of one person who pushed them to this point. Coach Lee Jiango addresses the group, explaining that while today was supposed to start with a basic evaluation, he's making a small change. Given their current state, the assessment will begin immediately. Hours pass, and by the end of the physical evaluation, every student is completely spent, barely able to stay on their feet. Coach Lee then informs them that Cheol will be overseeing their individual training from here on out. Cheol reflects on the grueling session. It lasted 10 hours. Even he's feeling the wear, but resting isn't an option. Later, as Cheol climbs the stairs, some students quietly comment on his attitude, noting how different he seems. They're surprised he didn't give them the day off, especially after what they went through yesterday. But Cheol gathers their attention and tells them to listen up. He states clearly that by now, they should know exactly who he is. Like Inha did the day before, he reminds them that the class leader has full control, aside from direct command from Coach Lee. He warns them that his training will be tough, and asks only those who are willing to endure it to step forward. It makes it clear he's not going to drag along anyone who can't keep up. One student, Kim Bozong, doesn't seem pleased with Cheol's tone, but Cheol continues, saying if anyone doesn't accept his leadership, they're welcome to challenge him. If they can land a clean hit, he'll step down, no questions asked. With that, he ends the speech and kicks off the training. Each student is to spar with a person beside them. After some time, Cheol calls it. Only 6 students lasted through the session. The rest dropped out halfway. He tells them that's enough for today and dismisses the group. But a few students are left grumbling. They don't understand why Cheol is pushing them so hard, and they question whether he's worth following. That's when Kim Han steps in. He tells them to quiet down. He's completely drained, yet even in his exhausted state, Cheol was still just as tired, and not a single one of them managed to hit him. The others remained silent. Instead of replying to Kim Han, they turn to Inha, looking for his thoughts. Some mutter that last year was definitely better than this. Inha responds with a sharp dose of honesty. If last year was really so great, then why did he end up repeating it? He admits that if he doesn't change now, he'll be stuck as nothing more than a loser who only knows how to fail. He declares that even if his arms and legs were broken, he'd still push himself. This time, he's giving it everything. He turns to the others, speaking directly. They all know the truth. The very truth Cheol is trying to show them. He says he wants to face that struggle head-on, just like Cheol said, because this might be his last shot. With a firm voice, he urges them to stop lying to themselves. Deep down, they already know what's real. They're just too scared to admit it. The scene shifts. Cheol is training in magic under the guidance of his aunt, Lee Jianga. She's clearly frustrated. Another attempt has failed, and she lets out her disappointment. Every time she tries to stabilize the aura, it falls apart. She hadn't expected this kind of setback after Cheol reached the 3rd star. She laments not having any ancient records on how aura was used in the past. If she had access to that knowledge, fixing the problem would have been far easier. Cheol stays silent, deep in thought, focusing on the ring that holds boundless. He can't access the newest part of the memory yet. What he does remember is chilling. Boundless was consumed by a dark energy so powerful that monsters trembled before him. Not even the strongest heroes could bring him down. In the end, a massive alliance of heroes came together and sealed Boundless away in Thousand Demon Mountain, far in the north. For their victory, the king rewarded them with a piece of land. Later, those same heroes forged a legendary weapon, Boundless. Cheol is thrilled by this revelation, considering it an incredible discovery. Lee Jianga then turns to him, impressed by how far he's come. Reaching the aura stage through sheer effort is no small feat, she encourages him, confident they'll overcome the current obstacle. She adds that he's already mastered both amplification and multiplication, a major achievement. Cheol then asks what happens after hitting the 3rd star. Lee Jianga explains that he'll gain the ability to use aura techniques, though mastering them will take time. She then brings up his recent training at the academy, noting how worn out he looks lately. Cheol lets out a sigh and says that nothing unusual has happened lately. Lee Jianga smiles gently and tells him that if things are getting tough, she's willing to step in. Curious, Cheol asks how exactly she plans to help. With a confident grin, she simply tells him to trust her. He'll understand soon enough. The scene cuts to the academy, where Cheol can't shake off a strange feeling ever since Lee Jianga made that promise. Coach Lee Jiango addresses the students, announcing that today's session will be led by a specialist in mana techniques. He tells everyone to stand straight and pay attention. Then, he introduces the instructor, Lee Jianga from the Marshall Lee Family's Research Center. He asks the students to give her a round of applause. Lee Jianga looks a bit embarrassed, but quickly shifts into her role. She wastes no time and begins the lesson right away. As she starts explaining, Cheol is taken aback by how effortlessly clear and engaging her teaching is. After covering the basics, she announces that the dull part is over. It's time for the exciting section. She's going to share an enhanced version of the mana techniques developed at the research center. Coach Lee Jiango looks surprised. He thought the lesson was wrapping up, but Lee Jianga corrects him, saying they're just getting started. She then asks everyone to stand and warns them that she'll only be demonstrating the technique once, so they need to watch closely. Lee Jianga then pulls Cheol aside. He asks what she's doing. She explains that those with ties to influential families usually receive support from the beginning, but Cheol hasn't gotten any of that. So now, she's stepping in to give him the help he deserves. Cheol is genuinely touched and thanks her for thinking of him. Placing a hand on his shoulder, Lee Jianga tells him that if her theory is right, his power is about to multiply. Coach Lee Jiango then calls the class together and tells them it's time to put the mana techniques into action through sparring matches. Everyone is to choose a partner. Inha walks up to Cheol and asks to train with him, assuring that he won't hold back. Cheol responds with a smirk, saying that's perfect because he's not planning to let Inha take the first move. Watching from the sidelines, Lee Jianga observes Cheol in action. She notes that he shows no mercy in battle. It reminds her of how she used to be. Nearby, some students murmur among themselves, admitting they dislike Cheol. To them, he's nothing like the rest. They begin to whisper among themselves, pointing out how Young's talents and physical abilities set him apart. Despite all their efforts, he started at a level far beyond theirs. That's when Jianga suddenly steps in, startling them with her unexpected presence. She walks up and asks if they were talking about Young. Caught off guard, the students quickly apologize, admitting they spoke out of turn. But Jianga's expression only grows colder. She challenges them. How could they speak on someone they clearly know nothing about? Kim Bozong steps forward, trying to defend their words. He argues that Jianga doesn't understand their struggle either. According to him, Young always looked down on them, never recognizing their hard work. Their lives, he says, couldn't be more different from his. As she turns to leave, Jianga calmly replies that they don't know anything, and it's better that way. If they ever found out what Young's daily life was really like, they'd realize their hardships were nothing more than a joke in comparison. Kim Bozong clenches his fists in silence, his frustration bubbling over. He swears he'll uncover what makes Young so special. Later that day, as training ends, Young takes a seat to rest while Kim Bozong watches from a distance, quietly seething. To him, Young doesn't look any different, just someone born lucky, pretending his life is harder than it is. Two fellow students walk up to Kim Bozong, reminding him of his earlier vow to follow Young. They ask if it's still okay for them to hang around the main estate. Kim Bozong assures them there's no issue, as long as they stick to the rules. He points out that Young doesn't even stay in the main family quarters, then adds that it's time to stop letting Young lead them. He'll put an end to this himself. They wait for Young in front of the research center, surprised by how long he's staying inside. Tired from training, they suggest heading home. They've got no clue what he's doing in there for so long. Just as they're about to leave, the door opens. Young steps out, and instead of heading home, he makes his way toward the training center. Their eyes widen in disbelief. That facility is strictly reserved for members of the direct bloodline. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes in the distance, but no one can figure out where it came from. One of the students turns to Kim Bozong and urges him to let it go. He insists that Young isn't the enemy. They all know he doesn't act out of malice. But Kim Bozong isn't moved. He points out that they should be more like Inha, who's never skipped a single training session. And yet, even with that dedication, he still can't understand why Young is so far ahead. The others leave, finally calling it a night. But Kim Bozong stays behind, unwilling to walk away. He's determined to find the truth, whatever it may be. He trails behind Young until they reach his residence. That's when a guard spots him and casually mentions that Bong walks this path every night, though he didn't expect another student to be tagging along tonight. Kim Bozong is floored. Young comes here every single day. The guard adds that, technically, this counts as breaking the rules, but he'll let it slide this time. He advises Kim Bozong to head back quickly. Before leaving, Kim Bozong glances one last time at Young's home. The lights are still burning brightly, and it's already past 2 in the morning. He finally turns back, realizing how late it's gotten. By 5 a.m., Kim Bozong is up again, head pounding from lack of sleep. He heads out for some air, but freezes when he sees Young sitting there, looking completely drained. He stares, stunned. Even if Young inherited an exceptional body and endless stamina from the Marshall Lee family, is it really normal to live on just 3 hours of sleep a night? Kim Bozong reflects on his own routine, resting after training, watching TV, maybe playing some games. He mixes rest with effort. But this? He walks up to Young, who gives him a puzzled look and asks what he's doing there so early. Instead of answering directly, Kim Bozong asks, "Aren't you tired from yesterday?" Young, now visibly annoyed, snaps back. He must have been one of the students tailing him last night. Kim Bozong admits it without hesitation. Then he adds that Young only had that opportunity because he's a direct descendant. He started from a place none of them could ever reach. Young responds quietly, saying he's lived this way since he was a child. While he might have gotten a bit more sleep before joining the academy, it doesn't make a difference now. Then, answering Kim Bozong's earlier question, he admits, yes, he's exhausted. Kim Bozong looks at him, confused. Then why keep pushing yourself this hard? Young doesn't explain. Instead, he places a hand on Kim Bozong's shoulder and says, "You already know why." With that, he walks off, leaving Kim Bozong standing there, lost in thought, wrestling with a growing frustration. Not at Young, but at himself. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Li Taixin, deep in training. His assistant enters, carrying the documents he requested. Li Taixin glances through them, but shakes his head in disappointment. "This isn't enough," he says, frowning. He points out that 7th and 8th level dungeons are far too dangerous for the students. Weapons can be replaced. Supplies too. But people? Never. His goal, he explains, is to shape individuals who can survive even in the worst possible conditions. The assistant nods, saying he understands and will follow through exactly as instructed. But before leaving, he pauses. There's one more thing he needs to report. He tells Li Taixin about Young, describing the look in his eyes, something far too grim for someone his age. It wasn't the gaze of a child. It was the look of someone who's suffered, endured humiliation, and witnessed far too much pain. He adds that leading others is a whole different challenge than simply enduring hardship. Then he hands over another set of documents, requesting a change in the upcoming test. Since Young is in the same academic year, the assistant proposes raising the difficulty for everyone. He wants to see if Young has what it takes to truly lead, not just survive. This next test, he says, will reveal everything. Cut to Coach Li Jiango entering the academy. He's caught off guard. Students are already in the middle of training, despite it being a scheduled rest day. He didn't even have to summon them. They came on their own. The students are equally surprised to see him. Coach Li chuckles, admitting he didn't expect this level of dedication on a day off. He then tells one of the students to wake up anyone still asleep. There's something they all need to hear. Once everyone's gathered, he delivers unexpected news. The midterm exams are being moved up. To prepare, they'll be given a 1-week break starting immediately. He advises them to rest properly and warns them not to overdo it during this break. One injury could ruin everything. Coach Li Jiango wraps up his announcement with a firm tone but a reassuring smile. He tells the students that he truly believes in their ability to pass the upcoming test. They've put in the work, and he knows they'll rise to the challenge. The scene then cuts to Young, who's still trying to make sense of everything. A break and an early exam schedule. Was this really for their benefit? Or is there something else at play here? He looks around and notices the students haven't left yet. Curious, he asks why they're still sticking around. Kim Han steps forward, saying they've been keeping an eye on him. He repeats his words, then asks what Young plans to do during the break. Young responds bluntly, "It's your personal time. Why are you so interested in mine?" He adds that they're free to rest if they want. He's not going to force anyone to train during the break. His answer catches them off guard. They had expected him to push them harder, maybe even double their training with no official sessions lined up. The fact that he didn't left them stunned. Young is taken aback by their reaction. Is that really how they see me? He wonders. He follows up with a half-serious question. Do you all really want to start over like the first day, even during your break? Then, with a smile, he reminds them that rest is just as important as training. If I told you this earlier, he adds, you wouldn't have listened anyway. He encourages them to make good use of their time off and says he'll see them after the break. The students, clearly relieved and happy, watch him go with new respect. We then shift to Li Jianga's research center. She looks up from her work as Young walks in, and with a weary sigh, teases him. She heard about the break, but didn't expect him to rush over so quickly just to bother his dear aunt. Still looking drained, she mutters about being buried under piles of unfinished research. Young fires back, saying she didn't look that busy a moment ago. She was watching something weird on her screen. Annoyed, she snaps at him. What she was watching wasn't nonsense. It was a segment about Heyman and receiving an award from the chairman. He's made a full recovery from leukemia. Young backs off, saying he didn't mean to interrupt. He was just curious. Then he gets serious. Was the early exam schedule your idea? Or was this my father's doing? She confirms it. The decision came directly from the head of the family. As Young reflects on the new changes, it hits him. The rescheduled evaluations won't be anything like he expected. They're going to be much tougher. If he wants to stand a chance, he must push his mana techniques past their current limits. To do that, he knows he needs access to the new memories stored within Boundless. But something's blocking him. He thought that modifying Boundless would unlock them, but it didn't. There's still a missing piece. Frustrated, but focused, he begins digging deeper into the problem. Just then, a stack of research papers slips off the table and lands at his feet. His aunt, Li Jianga, quickly scolds him to be more careful. She had asked him to keep those organized. As he picks them up, his hand stops on one document in particular. It's a study comparing ancient and modern weapons. According to the research, weapons in the past were created specifically to fight monsters. not for human combat. Reading that, something clicks. Young suddenly jumps to his feet, startling his aunt. What's going on? Lee Jianga asks, confused by his sudden energy. But he's already heading out the door, shouting back that he's found the answer. He promises to explain later and makes a beeline for the training center. The scene jumps to Young, standing inside the training facility. He calls forth Boundless and announces his intent to create a mental image, a target far larger than himself, a creature capable of threatening all of humanity. He concentrates, channeling his energy. He envisions a colossal beast, then states clearly, any technique that wastes energy, ignores defense, skips proper strikes, or just looks good without real impact, is meaningless. That's when it dawns on him. The true purpose of Boundless is simple, to destroy monsters. With a surge of clarity, he activates the skill, Demon Piercer. Finally, it works. Boundless responds. Excited, Young wonders what kind of memory will surface this time. Instantly, he's pulled into another vision. He finds himself back in the training center, just like the first time he held Boundless. But something is different. This time, he's watching from another point of view. Ahead, someone is moving at blinding speed, training with intensity. Young realizes it's the same person he saw in the previous memories. He watches closely. With each weapon switch, the figure's aura shifts completely, and each shift causes that figure form to transform as well. New shape, new energy. Young is stunned when the figure speaks to someone else, casually remarking on how quickly he's able to change his entire fighting style. The conversation in the memory continues. The man in the center of it all, still training fiercely, suddenly speaks without looking back. Stop spying on my sessions, he says bluntly. Then he asks, have you named any of those techniques you've been pulling from Boundless? The other person replies calmly, no, he hasn't. He doesn't see those moves as real techniques yet, not until they're refined. Then, with a casual shrug, he adds, you can name them if you want. The atmosphere shifts as the man narrows his eyes. Did you bring anyone else here with you? He asks. But the other immediately denies it. No one else came. There is no need. He came for a fair duel, nothing more. Without warning, he lunges forward and attacks, making it clear that this was the purpose of his visit all along. Watching from the memory, Young's attention sharpens. As the two clash, he catches a clear glimpse of the attacker's eyes and hair, distinct in color and intensity. That's it, Young realizes. Those features, those sharp, unmistakable traits, belong to the direct lineage of the Marshall Lee family. The day of the midterms had finally come. Class 5 boarded the bus with eager chatter, bound for the exam site. The ride through the forest was smooth. No monsters, no surprises. Gazing out the window, Chiol spotted a massive wall at the forest's edge. This wasn't an ordinary forest, nor was it one he'd seen in his dreams of that strange figure. He recalled the purpose of those walls. They divided safe zones from dangerous ones. It all started years ago when a portal surfaced near the Pacific, dubbed the Blue Hole. At first, curiosity and fear spread like wildfire. Humanity wondered what treasures might lie within. But before any exploration could begin, chaos erupted. Monsters spilled out of the portal, attacking without mercy, ravaging villages, towns, and leaving destruction in their wake. In response, humans banded together, raising armies to reclaim what was stolen and exact vengeance. Little by little, they won back some ground. But vast territories still remained infested. These areas became known as danger zones, marked off by colossal walls. As the bus rolled closer, a classmate commented on how bleak everything felt. Chiol explained, these lands near the wall were lifeless, void of animals, and barely inhabited. He remembered hiding in one of those villages during his previous life. It wasn't a memory he wanted to relive. As they passed through a tunnel, Chiol recognized their surroundings. He warned his classmates. They had entered a danger zone. The moment they stepped off the bus, an eerie presence filled the air. Everyone tensed, eyes darting, hands clenched. They were ready. If monsters came, they'd fight. Once everyone had stepped off the bus, Class 5 circled around Jungo. He laid out the plan. Everyone would set up camp in the safe zone. But before anything else, they needed to double-check their supplies and report back. Once they were fully geared up, the real test would begin. This time, they'd be going in alone. Jungo and the guards would stay behind, so whatever happened out there, they have to face it on their own. Still, he believed in them and knew they could handle it. Their mission? Track down an old human face spider and record a video of it. Easier said than done. The forest they were in was no ordinary forest. It was the infamous forest of the human-faced spiders, a place tangled with webs like a dungeon. Step on a web, and the monsters would know exactly where you were. The forest crawled with these spiders, hundreds of them, and while their goal was to find a 10-year-old specimen, they'd be swarmed by the younger ones before they ever got close. Despite the danger, the students were all fired up and eager to begin. Cheol stepped forward, telling his classmates he'd take the lead. He promised to do everything he could to help them pass. But then he admitted something. This midterm wasn't scheduled for now. It had been moved up, and the reason was him. His father had arranged this harsh trial to test him, one that no regular cadet should face. He told the others they had the choice to back out if they valued their safety. But no one left. Every single one of them chose to stay by his side. They trusted him, and they knew he'd get them through it. That loyalty hit Cheol hard. In his past life, he'd faced everything alone. No one had ever stood behind him like this. With their spirits high and their minds focused, Cheol rallied them to get moving. As they entered the dense forest, he explained that human-faced spiders weren't solitary. They had human-like heads and operated in colonies, working together much like ants or bees. After some time walking through the forest, Cheol suddenly turned to Inha and told him to take over. Inha was stunned. He didn't think he was fit to lead like Cheol and asked why he was stepping down. Cheol calmly explained his plan. He would act as bait for the human-faced spiders. The announcement caught everyone off guard. Confused and concerned, they listened as he laid out the strategy. Cheol then left the group and wandered deeper into the woods. It didn't take long before he encountered a few spider monsters. With one swift move of Boundless, he took them all down. But that was just the beginning. As expected, more monsters showed up, drawn by the danger pheromones released by the slain ones. That was exactly what he wanted. The spiders only dragged the strongest prey back to their nest to drain their energy, so he had to prove he was worth capturing. As more spiders closed in, Cheol used Demon Piercer to cut down any that got too close. Eventually, they all rushed him at once. Cheol lowered his defenses and allowed himself to be caught. Just as planned, the spiders cocooned him and began dragging him toward their nest. Inside the cocoon, Cheol activated his stealth skill and sliced his way out with Boundless. But what he saw shocked him. There were far too many cocoons, untouched, and clearly not from just one day. Something wasn't right. Then, a larger cocoon nearby began to tremble. It pulsed with dark energy that reacted with the badge on Cheol's chest. He stared as the cocoon split open. From within, a rank 5 monster emerged, the queen of the human-faced spiders. She immediately launched an attack, somehow sensing him despite his concealment. The dark energy from her aura reached out to the badge, allowing Cheol to hear her thoughts. She told him it was the badge that had awakened her, and now she wanted it. She unleashed her pressure, a high-level move meant to paralyze her enemies. But Cheol stood firm, his aura overpowering hers with ease. The queen was stunned by how easily he suppressed her mana. Just as the tension peaked, a massive explosion rocked the outside of the nest. The explosion ripped through the forest like a declaration of war. Flames consumed the trees, thick smoke twisting into the sky. This was all part of Cheol's trap, to ignite the woods, provoke the spiders, and force them out of the nest. The plan worked too well. The inferno spread fast, and the queen of the human-faced spiders let out a deafening screech that made the webs above shudder. She hadn't expected anyone to challenge her, let alone a group of students. The nest quaked under her fury. Cheol knew his classmates would arrive in 30 minutes. Just then, Jungo's voice crackled through the earpiece, tense, anxious, asking about the rank 5 threat. Cheol didn't give the full picture. He simply told Jungo to focus on keeping the others safe. He could take care of this himself. The queen hissed, her words leaking into his mind through the corrupted energy. She commanded her offspring to defend their territory while she handled him personally. Cheol didn't move. Her words dripped with venom, calling him arrogant and vowing to tear him apart before his friends even arrived. Cheol met her promise with calm resolve. She had no idea what he was capable of. Golden light erupted around him as he unleashed his full power. Outside, the students sprang into action. Cheol had given clear instructions: distract the spiders, keep them away from the nest, and buy him time. One group would lead the monsters out, while another would extract them if things went south. It was dangerous, more than what cadets should face, but no one questioned the plan, not even when someone flinched at the mention of a rank 5. Inha stepped in, firm and focused. Sheol needed them. That was all that mattered. Back in the nest, the queen's rage turned violent. She struck wildly, her claws shredding the ground, raking across Sheol's body. Blood dripped from his mouth. His legs wobbled, but he stood his ground. She couldn't understand why he wasn't collapsing. What she didn't know was that Sheol had activated his demonic eyes. Every move, every attack, every weakness, it was all laid bare before him. He weaved through her strikes, dodging the deadliest blows. But her strength still landed heavy. One hit cracked his ribs, another scorched his side. She was fast, brutal, but fresh from rebirth, not yet at full strength. And that was all the edge Sheol needed. The queen lunged again, but this time Sheol was ready. He rolled aside, grabbed a healing potion, and poured it over his injured arm. The bleeding stopped instantly, the wounds sealing shut. He shifted Boundless into its simplest form, a plain sword. The atmosphere changed. Energy crackled in the air. With a swift strike, Sheol launched a chi projectile thunder from his blade. It slammed into the queen's chest, knocking her backward. She shrieked, but didn't go down. Her armored hide was too thick to pierce cleanly. Still, she was furious. She spat venom and backed off, promising to drain his life slowly, keeping him alive just for the pain. Suddenly, webbing shot out. Before Sheol could react, it wrapped tightly around him, pinning his damaged ribs. He struggled to cut through it, but she held on. Her laughter echoed through the nest, sharp and cruel. Then everything shifted. Flames erupted around them. The nest lit up red. The queen screamed as the fire licked at her. Her children outside had been caught in a wave of explosions. Blasts rained from the sky, setting the forest ablaze. Sheol's classmates had arrived just in time. They charged in and pulled him from the nest, half burned but still alive. As they marched back, Sheol, bruised and bandaged, scolded them for moving too slowly. He told them they'd be getting extra training speed up. No exceptions. Back at the academy, the instructors waited. 30 minutes had passed since the mission's time limit ended. Quiet murmurs began to spread. Class 5 might have failed. Then the doors swung open. Jungo entered first, drenched in sweat. He'd been busy rushing the students to the infirmary. He didn't wait to rest. He went straight to the report. Class 5 had been sent to record a spider, but then a rank 5 monster showed up. The mission changed instantly. They adapted, they planned, and they pulled off a full rescue with almost no backup. The instructors stayed silent. Then Jungo dropped one more detail. They'd used 184 explosives to make it happen. Gasps filled the room. The instructors were livid. This was supposed to be a simple recording task. They demanded the footage. That's when Sheol walked in, battered and heavily wrapped in bandages, carrying the drive. The footage had been damaged during the fight. It took effort to salvage, but he got it, without a word. He handed it over and stood beside his sister. Seo Hyun didn't hold back. Right there in front of everyone, she scolded Sheol for pushing too far, taking reckless chances, and getting himself captured. Sheol stayed silent. He didn't argue. Instead, he let the footage speak. The room went still as the video played. The nest, the queen, the inferno swallowing the forest. The destruction was undeniable. The head instructor finally spoke, questioning whether all of it, the fire, the explosives, the chaos, had been truly necessary. Sheol answered calmly. He did what was needed to protect his team. He didn't run when things got worse. He stayed and fought. They could criticize his methods, but the results spoke for itself. The room fell silent again. Some instructors rewound the footage. Others just watched Sheol, quietly taking in everything they'd seen. In the end, none of them could dispute the outcome. Class 5 had completed the mission. They faced a rank 5 monster and came back with proof. No other class had ever done that. The verdict was unanimous. Class 5 earned a perfect score. For the first time, they were ahead. Sheol allowed himself a smile. He brought his team victory. The Lee Clan manor was quiet, too quiet. Only the butler's calm voice dared to break the stillness. His report was precise. The wounded from the recent mission were on the mend, and the compensation for the dead was already being handled quickly, quietly, efficiently. Nothing had been missed. Then came the mission footage. Short, patchy, clearly trimmed. The clan head watched it in silence, reclining slightly as the screen flickered. Too neat, too polished, obviously doctored. He didn't comment. Instead, he turned to his closest aide with a single question, his thoughts on Sheol. The butler answered without pause. Sheol had strength, but lacked control. The clan head nodded. Sheol's foundation techniques were honed into weapons. Deceptively simple, yet brutally effective. But his arrogance was a problem. During the exam, he'd used an excessive amount of explosives for something that could have been handled with finesse. He had skill, yes, but also sway. His instructor, his peers, they followed his lead without question. That kind of loyalty wasn't trained. It was innate. The clan head grew curious. His illegitimate son wasn't hiding anymore. So, he gave a new command. Cheol's next trials would be relentless. No breaks. No mercy. He wanted to see just how far the boy could be pushed before he cracked. The butler bowed and left. Alone again, the clan head pondered. The others in the family would feel Cheol's rise. Feel threatened. Good. He wanted to see what Cheol would do when the pressure came from within. Time moved on. Class 5 nailed their final exam, but Cheol didn't let up. When Kim asked why they were still training, Cheol reminded them. He'd already given them a day off. That was enough. The promotional exams were ahead, and anyone who failed would have to repeat the year. Inha knew the stakes. After 2 years of trying, he finally believed promotion was within reach, thanks to Cheol's lead. Cheol didn't sugarcoat it. Kim had the weakest mana, so he had to put in more effort than the rest. Today was physical training. No one was getting left behind. The promotional test was coming fast. Cheol knew the difference between passing and surviving. It wasn't luck. No one had died since the beginning, aside from the few who dropped out. That was preparation. Kim, who once lagged behind, didn't complain anymore. He pushed hard like the rest, sweat pouring, eyes locked in. Cheol saw it all. Every stride, every spell misfire, every mental breaking point. He kept track. He was proud, but he'd never say it. Then Jungo showed up. There was a meeting about the upcoming exam. Cheol didn't ask questions. He just followed. Tension hung heavy in the meeting room. Seohai motioned for Cheol to sit beside her. She greeted him with a casual congratulations on passing the exams, which he returned. But her expression soon changed, sharpened. She leaned in. She'd seen something. Their half-siblings, along with his stepmother, together at the academy. Since that meeting, those same siblings had been wandering the grounds, chatting up students. Too convenient to ignore. Cheol didn't flinch. He'd been aware for a while. Training logs going missing, weapons malfunctioning, gear tampered with. Wasn't bad luck. It was sabotage. Subtle. Consistent. He told her it started after the quarter exams. That caught her off guard. Still, even now, Cheol didn't know what their endgame was. Didn't matter. Whatever they were scheming wouldn't change his path. Seohine didn't dwell on their plot either. Her eyes stayed on her own goal, getting stronger. Winning without shortcuts. She wasn't just chasing a title. It was personal. She wanted to beat him. And when she did, she wanted him to call her Nuna. He didn't get it, but he respected it. Before the moment could stretch, the door opened again. The instructor stepped in and got straight to the point. The promotional exam had been decided. Cheol listened, and everything clicked. They'd be entering a gate. A real one. No simulations. No safety nets. A true piece of the monster realm. The rules? Simple. Each student would receive a token. Lose it, and you were considered dead. Eliminated. Survive. Collect tokens. Steal others if you had to. And find the hidden ones scattered throughout the gate. The clock would be ticking. But Cheol wasn't fooled by the setup. This wasn't just a test. It was a kill zone. No cameras. No observers. No accountability. If a student vanished or died, no one would question it. No one would know. It was too perfect, too convenient. Someone had pushed this through, and he could see the fingerprints all over it. His half-siblings. Their scheme had finally taken shape. But where they saw a trap, Cheol saw opportunity. This was the break he'd been waiting for. No interference. No surveillance. He could finally drop the act. If they wanted the final clash, then so be it. But this time, he'd be the one deciding how it played out. In a quiet tower room far from the training grounds, J-Hack stepped inside. Seora was already there, lounging in his chair like it was hers. And in this case, it might as well have been. He didn't challenge her. They both understood who was in charge. Seora's gaze burned with icy focus. She was done with Cheol, done seeing him walk their halls, hearing their father say his name. He didn't belong in their world, and yet he acted like he did. Even worse, others followed him. What started as an irritation had turned into a real threat. Their mother had made the objective crystal clear. The promotional exam was their chance. It wouldn't be repeated. They would eliminate him, here now inside the gate. J-Hack didn't push back. This was exactly what he'd expected. They had waited long enough. Whatever respect Cheol thought he'd earned, it would be torn away the moment he stepped inside that battlefield. The day of the promotional exam arrived. heavy with expectation. Sheol felt it, but didn't let it show. Dozens of students stood at the gate's edge, tension pulsing beneath crisp uniforms. Beside him, Kim was stiff, his eyes flicking toward the armed guards lining the perimeter. Sheol spoke, more to steady himself than Kim. The security wasn't just for their safety, it was for show, for the public. And because this gate wasn't just a training ground, it was a scar, an old experimental zone still crawling with secrets. His gaze moved across the crowd. A few students stood out, faces he recognized, faces that had lingered too long in the wrong places, whispered to his half-siblings, passed supplies in the shadows, or cornered classmates when no one was watching. He'd expected more to show. Maybe the rest stayed out of it. Maybe they thought Class 5 would break under pressure. Maybe they thought Sheol would. But his group didn't flinch. They stood tall, focused, ready. No hesitation when he stepped forward. No doubts when the plan went into motion. They crossed into the gate like a unit, no longer just students, but something sharper. The world twisted around them. The air shifted, and Sheol's thoughts followed. This wasn't a test anymore. It was a battlefield. Miles away, J-Hack leaned against a cold steel table, his eyes on the ticking clock more than the surveillance feed. Seora reclined nearby, smug, already imagining what reward she'd claim from their mother once this was over. To her, Sheol was already done. J-Hack's thoughts drifted. Their eldest brother had once said something about the danger of fighting someone with nothing left to lose. He dismissed it at the time. He still did, mostly. But the words lingered like smoke in a locked room. When the alert buzzed on his device, he nearly ignored it. But the message on the screen froze him. 21 spies, eliminated. 15, withdrawn. Class 5, fully passed. He didn't stop Seora as she grabbed the phone and read it aloud. Her rage snapped the silence in half. The phone cracked under her grip, fragments scattering across the polished floor. J-Hack stared at the wreckage. It didn't make sense. Sheol was supposed to lose, supposed to be crushed. But he hadn't just survived, he'd won. Quietly, cleanly, completely. The brother they dismissed, the one who was supposed to stay in the shadows, had just upended everything. J-Hack's throat tightened. For the first time, he felt the chill of a threat they had grossly underestimated. Inside the gate, 2 students scrambled through twisted roots and jagged rock, lungs burning with panic. They hadn't meant to provoke Sheol. They just hadn't expected him to be this fast, this ruthless, this cold. Now, they were running for their lives, ducking into a shallow cave, like cornered prey. But it didn't matter. Hiding wouldn't save them. Sheol tracked them without effort. His demonic eye cut through darkness and panic, locking onto their fear like a beacon. He entered the cave silently, almost casually. A sharp twist of his hand crushed the first one's fingers before the second could react. The scream echoed off the stone, sharp and raw. The second student backed away, pleading, confused, desperate to understand. Sheol didn't bother with answers. They had chosen their allegiance. They'd laid hands on someone bearing the Lee name. That was all it took. His next strike was deliberate, meant to hurt, not kill. Precise, unforgiving. Then he turned and walked out, not once looking back. Outside, a teammate was waiting with a status update. More targets down. Sheol nodded, issued a few quick orders, and sent him off. The mission wasn't over. There were still enemies moving in the brush, still traitors breathing. He had work to finish. While the others scattered to finish cleanup, Sheol focused inward. The tokens were hidden all across the gate, tucked under rocks, masked by spells, buried beneath shallow soil. Most would need luck to find even one. Sheol didn't. His demonic eye revealed everything, the shimmer beneath the surface, the bent reflection that betrayed an illusion. He moved steadily, picking up tokens without a fight, letting others waste energy chasing ghosts. His pack grew heavier. His muscles screamed, but he didn't stop. This wasn't about scoring points. This was about making a statement. His siblings had set this trap, expecting him to fall. He planned to walk out not just alive, but as the last one standing. By late afternoon, the chaos had died down. Most students were drained, scattered, finished. But someone was still closing in, deliberate, unhurried. C.O. Hyan. He'd known she was trailing him. Chose to ignore it. Until now. He paused, and she caught up, surprised to see him waiting. But he wasn't. There was nothing about her he hadn't already anticipated. C.O. Hyan didn't ask if he was ready. She didn't offer a reason. She just challenged him, like always. That quiet, relentless style of hers, laced with stakes that made his skin crawl. The terms were absurd. If she won, he'd have to call her Nuna. If he won, she'd call him Appa. He didn't like either. The words carried too much weight, too many layers he didn't care to peel back. But he drew his sword anyway. This wasn't about titles. It wasn't even about her. It was about now. About everything that had led to this moment. His pack was heavy with tokens. His enemies were down. The gate still smoldered in his wake. And here she was, his sister, standing in the eye of it all. She struck first, her blade catching what little light filtered through the warped sky. He met her head-on. No pause, no pullback. Not as her brother. Not as her rival. As the boy they'd cast aside. The one who refused to stay down. The one who fought, every time, for a place that wasn't given. She was skilled. Always had been. But Sheol had come through something harder. Something colder. He'd been sharpened by it. And this time, he had no intention of losing. The air was thick with anticipation as the results of the promotional exam were about to be announced. It wasn't just the candidates who were tense. Everyone at the academy was on edge, having watched the trials unfold with growing unease. Rumors had been flying ever since the exam began. Whispers that it had been made more dangerous. All because of Sheol and Seo Hyun. Whether it was a show of favoritism or some form of punishment, no one could say for sure. But one thing was certain. Seo Hyun was expected to take the top spot. She had the pedigree, the training, the backing of her clan. Her path had been shaped by privilege. Sheol, on the other hand, carried the weight of being an outsider. Yet, something unexpected had stirred. Class 5, long dismissed as the Academy's rejects, had started to draw attention. Where most had predicted failure, they'd instead seen success. Many thought they'd be wiped out inside the gate, a convenient footnote in someone else's rise. But they had made it through, stronger, not broken. As students gathered for the announcement, Sheol stood quietly among them, unmoved. Then his name echoed across the hall. First place. A stunned silence followed. Even Sheol was briefly taken aback, not by the result, but that the Academy had actually acknowledged it. His victory over Seo Hyun had been clear, his token count irrefutable. Covering it up would have shattered the Academy's credibility. Beside him, Jungo beamed with pride, telling Sheol this was a moment worth celebrating. But Sheol didn't speak of pride. Instead, his thoughts drifted to his nanny, probably throwing a party without him. He had won, but he knew this was just the beginning. Jungo called Inha up next. After 2 long years of trying, failing, and trying again, he had finally made it through. His persistence had paid off. Sheol gave him a small nod, a silent warning not to get too comfortable. Passing the exam wasn't the end, just another step forward. Kim and Bosung had passed too, their faces bright with excitement. But even in that moment of triumph, none of them forgot their past. They all knew what came next: separation. New classes, new teams, new assignments. The unit they'd formed under Cheol's leadership would be split. Still, the connection between them was something more than circumstance. They had fought together, trained together, grown stronger together. Then Sheol stepped up and addressed them. His tone was calm, not celebratory but firm. He admitted that he had planned to punish those who didn't pass, but there was no need. Every single one of them had made it, and he was proud. He reminded them this wasn't the finish line. Things would only get harder. They'd carry the label of Class 5 with them, a badge others would mock, a target on their backs. People would question their strength, doubt their abilities, but they had already faced worse and survived. They could keep going. Sheol looked each of them in the eye and said he believed in them. And that was enough. Later, at the mansion, Sheol walked alongside Seo Hyun down the garden path toward their father's office. She was still stewing over her loss, complaining that the match had been unfair because he'd taken all her tokens. She blamed her defeat on not being able to use her ivory sword, insisting she hadn't fought at full power. Sheol didn't argue. In his mind, she had a point. He'd thought it would be an easy win, but the fight had dragged on far longer than expected. She was stronger than he had given her credit for. She hadn't even activated her abilities. If she had, he might not have won at all. Then she cleared her throat, snapping him out of his thoughts. She brought up the bet again, the one where the loser had to address the winner with a special title. Before she could get the word out, Sheol covered her mouth with his hand, a sharp warning in his eyes. He wasn't in the mood for teasing. Seo Hyun nodded, feigning innocence, but the amusement dancing in her eyes gave her away. Without exchanging another word, the two entered their father's office. Their father sat waiting, composed, commanding, and gestured for them to sit and share tea. He asked what they had learned during the exam. Seo Hyun answered first, and her response took Sheol by surprise. She spoke without hesitation, saying that true strength came from honest effort, not the manipulation and underhanded tactics their family had always relied on. Cheol nearly choked on his tea, unprepared for such blunt honesty from her. Their father listened, expression unreadable. He asked her to explain. Co Hyen continued, saying she no longer wanted victories handed to her through family ties or tricks. She wanted to win on her own terms. Her voice was calm, unwavering. He stared at her, quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Now he understood why the Holy Sword had chosen her. She wasn't the same girl she used to be. She had grown, maybe even because of Cheol. Then he turned to Cheol. Unlike Co Hyen, Cheol was ready. He said the students at the academy lacked drive. They weren't committed, didn't fight like it mattered. In his eyes, they didn't deserve to be there. He blamed the instructors, criticizing their lax standards and weak leadership. If things didn't change, the academy's reputation and the family name would crumble. Their father laughed, catching Cheol off guard. Then, instead of scolding him, he offered advice. He said strong beliefs were good, but warned against letting those beliefs become blind spots. Being rigid made you predictable, and predictability could be exploited by enemies. It was rare for their father to give advice, especially without a lesson hidden inside punishment. Cheol took it all in silent, but their father wasn't finished. He acknowledged that both of them had passed trials that may have been designed to break them, and they had emerged stronger. As a reward, he offered them each one request. Co Hyen lit up immediately. Cheol stayed quiet. Their father never gave freely. There was always a price. Still, Co Hyen made her choice without hesitation. A master gray dragon scale breastplate. Their father agreed. It would be ready the next day. Then he turned to Cheol. Cheol didn't flinch. He asked for entry into Chanwizen. The room fell still. Even Co Hyen froze. Their father stared at him, expression unreadable. Cheol didn't back down. This was what he wanted, and what happened next would shape everything. Chanwizen. The name alone had once felt like a myth to Cheol, a distant mountain cloaked in mist, filled with rare herbs and creatures that could tear a man apart. At the Lee Martial Academy, it marked the final threshold, the divide between students and real warriors. But for Cheol, it was more than that. It was a second chance, a way to rewrite the failures of his past life. He remembered the pills he'd crafted, brittle, unstable, elixirs that decayed faster than they healed. Back then, he had ambition, but no true understanding. This time, he wouldn't settle for shortcuts. He needed to understand the herbs from the roots up, their essence, how they interacted with blood, breath, and pain. It wasn't enough to be stronger. He had to be sharper, wiser. The moment his father gave permission, Cheol began to prepare. He moved with methodical calm, checking every item as if preparing for battle. Scalpel sets, bundles of linen, vials, parchment, string, flint. Enough dried rations to last 2 weeks. A steel mortar, and a weathered book, his own handwritten collection of ancient medicinal formulas transcribed by candlelight. His fingers lingered on the pages. They had failed him once. He wouldn't let them fail again. As he tightened the last strap on his pack, his nanny appeared quietly. Jae-Hak, his seventh half-brother, had requested a meeting. Cheol didn't react. Jae-Hak never acted without purpose, especially after what had gone down in the exams. The timing wasn't coincidence, it was calculation. Cheol nodded. He had been expecting this. They met in the outer garden house, where tea was always served. Jae-Hak greeted him with polished warmth, every movement carefully rehearsed. He poured the tea with practiced ease, like a man performing for an audience. To Cheol, it was obvious this wasn't a reunion. It was a test. Their conversation drifted through meaningless niceties. The weather, estate matters, a few comments about their father. It was all pretense. And then, finally, Jae-Hak let the mask slip. He mentioned the exam, said he and Seora had been behind its design, claimed it hadn't been entirely his decision. Offered an apology. Cheol didn't flinch. He drank his tea, eyes steady, watching the way Jae-Hak watched him. This wasn't about regret. It was Jae-Hak calculating risk. He wasn't sure if Cheol had become a threat, and he wasn't ready to pick a side just yet. Cheol didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He told Jae-Hak it didn't matter. This was the reality they lived in. Rivalries, betrayal, schemes. Fairness was never part of the equation. But then he added something else. Low and without emotion. Anyone who harmed his classmates would be his enemy. That was the line, and he knew Jae-Hak would understand exactly what he meant. For the first time, Jae-Hak hesitated. He asked Cheol what he wanted. Cheol didn't dance around it. One word. Clear. Direct. Compensation. Jae-Hak agreed. Every member of Class 5 would receive mid-grade elixirs. Cheol would get a separate reward. It was more than he had expected. He had figured Jae-Hak would offer a token gift or two, nothing more. But even Jae-Hak didn't want to risk turning Cheol into a true enemy. Not yet. When they shook hands, it wasn't peace, it was business. As Cheol turned to leave, Jae-Hak called out one last thing, a warning. Seora. She hated him now more than ever. No allies left, no mother to shield her. Just pure, dangerous hatred. A cornered beast. Cheol didn't respond, but his thoughts were sharp. He wasn't worried, not now. He was leaving for Chanwizen. She wouldn't follow. That mountain was sacred. Even vengeance had boundaries. But not far away, that vengeance burned. Behind heavy curtains in a sealed chamber, Seora knelt, head bowed, trembling under the weight of her mother's fury. Madame Beck struck her hard. The slap cracked through the silence. Her words were cutting, deliberate. She disowned her without hesitation. Seora begged, pleaded, promised she would fix it, said she'd go on the mission alone, kill Cheol herself. None of it mattered. Madame Beck was done. She called her daughter a disgrace. Weak, unworthy of the family name. Seora wept, but it was over. Her mother turned to leave, leaving behind one final warning. If they met again, it wouldn't be just a slap. And then she was gone. The quiet in the chamber wasn't quiet at all. It thundered inside Seora's chest. She stayed on her knees, unmoving, her face streaked with tears, though her eyes had gone dry. The shame couldn't compete with the fury building inside her. She didn't want retribution for the exam, or even the humiliation. She wanted to destroy Cheol for stealing her place, her identity, her mother's approval. She would break him completely. No more schemes. No more allies. Just raw, unfiltered violence. Outside, Jae-Hak stood leaning against a wooden post, ankle resting over the other, arms crossed. He had heard everything. None of it surprised him. If anything, he was impressed. Madame Beck hadn't just cast Seora aside. She'd turned her into a weapon. Forced her into a corner so tight, the only path left was forward, teeth bared. Whether Cheol, the bright new contender, or Seora, now driven by nothing but rage, came out on top didn't matter to him. He planned to enjoy the spectacle either way. That evening, a sleek black car glided into the courtyard, engine whispering beneath the cool air. Cheol approached, bag slung over his shoulder. The pine-scented breeze cut clean across the stones. He opened the door, expecting an empty seat. Instead, Butler Choi was there, seated, composed, as if he'd been waiting all day. He greeted Cheol with his usual calm, informing him that he would accompany him to Chanwizen, at least up to Soma Mountain. Cheol didn't question it. His father never moved pieces without purpose. If Choi was coming, there was more to this trip than anyone had said. It didn't change anything. The mountain still called. Cheol hadn't expected anyone to be inside the car. But the moment he opened the door and saw Choi sitting there, hands neatly folded, he knew this wasn't just a coincidence. His father had clearly sent him. There was no other reason Choi would be here, not without something already set in motion. Choi didn't move without purpose, and he certainly wouldn't trail the illegitimate son of the clan unless something had already been decided behind closed doors. When Choi casually mentioned he had business on the mountain, Cheol didn't buy it. Choi was far too calculated for empty excuses. Everyone in the clan knew, though no one dared say it, that Choi held more sway than most of the elders put together. He didn't throw his weight around, but when he spoke, people listened. And beneath his calm surface, that power was always there, silent but unmistakable. Cheol could feel the quiet pressure of Choi's aura. It wasn't threatening, but it clung to the air like winter frost, cold, quiet, and impossible to ignore. The rest of the ride passed in silence. Neither pushed for answers, but the silence wasn't meaningless. It was measured, like a board being reset for a bigger game. And Cheol had just been moved deeper into play. Choi eventually broke the silence, asking why Cheol stopped at Mount Sungmu when his actual destination was Chanwizen. Cheol gave him the truth. He wasn't there to ask for strength or to legitimize his position. He came to pay respect. His place in the family had always been shaky, built more on obligation than acceptance. But the founder's grave didn't care about lineage or court politics. It stood for something older, something real. By standing there, Cheol was claiming his place, not because someone gave it to him, but because he chose it. Choi didn't speak right away, but Cheol felt he understood. Then, out of nowhere, Choi asked if Cheol liked hiking. The question caught him off guard. Cheol admitted he'd never done it before. In his past life, Every moment had been a race, always behind, always chasing. Choi said he used to hike a lot, that he loved climbing mountains. Then he asked how Cheol would climb one. Cheol said he'd go straight up, no hesitation, as fast as possible. Choi gave a small nod. Sometimes, he said, the direct path wasn't the fastest. If you took time to understand the mountain, to find your place in it, you might just find a better way up. Cheol instantly understood. Choi wasn't just talking about hiking. This was about martial arts, about how to live. Since returning to the past, Cheol had thrown himself into everything new. Skills he'd missed, knowledge he never had time for, training he never mastered. But in all that rush forward, he'd ignored something just as vital, what he already had. His strengths, his foundation, the essence he carried from his first life. That had been a blind spot. Progress didn't always mean pushing ahead. Sometimes it meant stopping, observing, understanding the tools already in your hands. He didn't say anything, but his nod was enough. The silence between them shifted, no longer heavy, but steady, like shared ground. They reached Mount Sungmu not long after. A shimmering barrier pulsed before them, thick with the clan's ancient energy. Cheol paused, unsure if Choi could pass. Only those with clan blood or explicit permission were allowed through. Choi simply said the former leader had granted him access. Of course, it made sense. Crossing the barrier, Cheol felt a rush, a wave of mana washing through his chest. Not painful, just undeniable. This place was different, ancient, a place that watched back. Choi mentioned he was heading to the grave of the former clan head. Cheol told him he was going to the founders. The founder's grave lay deep within the woods, hidden among pines and the quiet of old things. Cheol didn't rush. Each step was deliberate, pulling him closer to the reason he'd come. Not for duty, for clarity. He needed something real to center him, something that made the path ahead feel like his own. When he reached the grave, he stood still for a while. Then he knelt, bowed deeply, and laid his sword down before the stone. That sword wasn't just steel, it held secrets. His brother had once spoken of the 9 Hyuka seals, each unlocked through trials that shaped the soul. Cheol had broken 3 so far. The first when the clan acknowledged him, the second when he proved his bloodline, and the third during the naming ceremony. The fourth was tied to Chanwizen. That much he knew, but how to unlock it? That was why he came here. He poured alcohol over the blade and waited. A faint glow lit the sword, and above it, a word appeared, Wienwi. That was it. His next trial, the Wienwi test, was waiting at Chanwizen, and it held the key to the next seal. As the word glowed above the blade, something shifted inside Cheol. Not fear, not even resolve, but something deeper. Recognition. This was the edge of the map. His former self had never made it this far. Everything from here on out was unwritten. His steps, his choices, this was his story now. Then, Choi's voice cut through the stillness, quiet and sudden, just like the man himself. He'd returned without a sound. He asked Cheol how he felt. Cheol kept it simple. This mountain wasn't like Mount Sungmu. Chanwizen didn't feel like a place of memories or mourning. It felt like change, like transformation waiting to happen. Choi gave him a calm wish of good luck. Before they could say anything more, a new voice rang out, slurred, annoyed loud. A man stumbled into view, a bottle in hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Messy, ragged, but his presence cut sharp, lethal. Immediately, the bodyguards moved, forming a circle around Cheol and Choi. The drunk didn't flinch. He gave a single warning. They ignored it. In an instant, they were down. All of them. Cheol didn't even see it happen. One moment, they stood ready. The next, they were crumpled on the ground, like grass mowed down by a gust of wind. The man took another drink, then shot Choi an annoyed look, irritated they hadn't told him they were coming. Cheol stared, stunned. The man didn't even try to explain himself. But Choi did. This was the mountain keeper of Chanwizen, the guardian, the gate. The man eyed Cheol closely, pulling off his glasses as if to make sure what he saw was real. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. Cheol didn't belong. Not yet. Not with that name. Not with that gaze. But Cheol didn't flinch. He wasn't here to be accepted. He was here to become. Choi introduced Cheol with his usual composed formality, the same tone he used whenever speaking on behalf of the clan. No extra words, no unnecessary details, just the facts. Cheol was the 9th son of the clan leader, and he'd brought him here to train. That was it. But the mountain keeper wasn't one for ceremony. He just stared at Cheol for a long moment before asking a single question. Had Cheol seen anything during the earlier scuffle? Sheol nodded slightly. He hadn't caught it all, but he'd seen enough to know the truth. What looked like a drunken stumble had been anything, but every step, every sway was intentional. Sharp, lethal. The keeper gave a faint smile, but his eyes stayed flat. He said Sheol reminded him of his father, cold, unreadable, filled with contradictions. Then he frowned, sniffing the air like something smelled off. He muttered that Sheol carried a strange scent and an even stranger eye. Before Sheol could react, a sharp burn flared in his left eye. His vision warped. The demonic eye had awakened. It didn't happen often, but when it did, the world shifted. Everything turned into outlines. Faces blurred, and the man in front of him, he wasn't human. Sheol had suspected it, but now he saw it clearly. The Mountain Keeper was a Dakibi. In his true form, his eyes held galaxies, and fate lines shimmered all around him like strands of light woven into the night. Sheol remembered the stories, whispers from his past life. Dakibi could read fate like others read weather. And once they saw it, they believed it was fixed, set, untouchable. But Sheol, with his demonic eye, could see more. Fate wrapped around the Dakibi like silver vines, endless and tangled. The keeper leaned in and said Sheol's fate was twisted, his fortune and misfortune locked together, impossible to separate. The higher he climbed, the more danger would chase him. Later, back at the mountain house, the Dakibi grabbed Choi's alcohol without hesitation and downed it fast. Then he turned to Sheol, gaze heavy, asking what sin he'd committed to end up here. Sheol didn't blink. He said he came to train, to grow stronger. The Dakibi let out a single laugh, low, bitter. Then he asked what Sheol planned to do with the entire year ahead. Sheol knew his words wouldn't stay in that room. Everything he said would find its way back to his father. Choi never asked questions for nothing. Every conversation was just another kind of report. But Sheol wasn't concerned anymore. His journey couldn't be molded by politics or filtered through someone else's expectations. He said it clearly. He had come to Chanwiz in a train, and to face the Chanwi trial. No bravado, no pride, just truth. The Dakibi's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't object. He simply watched. Sheol asked for directions to the training grounds, then turned and left, no pause, no glance back. The Dakibi watched him go, noting how his steps never faltered. Then he looked at Choi and muttered, almost to himself, that the kid was like a rock grinding itself sharper with every step. Choi gave a nod and told him to heal the bodyguards, and to leave. Once the room was quiet again, the Dakibi reached for another bottle, took a long drink, and shot Choi a side glance. He asked what the butler was really doing here. Alcohol delivery didn't suit him. As always, Choi kept it short. He was there to request a star reading for Sheol, directly ordered by the clan leader. At first, the Dakibi refused. Fate wasn't something he shared lightly. But when Choi hinted at tallying up the cost of every bottle he'd emptied since their arrival, the Dakibi groaned and gave in. He turned toward the corner of the room, where blue flames danced in silence, and stared deep into them. Then he spoke. Sheol's path was long, unstable, but always moving, a thread pulling in the opposite direction of the weave. He warned Choi that the heavenly gates would open soon, and with them, monsters would flood the world. Chaos would follow, and Sheol would be swept into it, no matter what he tried. His advice to the clan leader was simple. Do what he always did. Defend. Protect. Don't reach. Choi took the words in, showing no reaction. As he prepared to leave, the Dakibi asked a final question. Did he care about Sheol? Choi didn't answer that directly. He just said he was the clan's butler. The Dakibi didn't believe it for a second. He reminded Choi that the Chanwi trial wasn't something a rookie should attempt. Choi didn't respond to that either. He only asked the Dakibi to keep watching, because Sheol was going to surprise him. Then, just like that, he was gone. Silent as always. The Dakibi let out a long sigh and leaned back against the floor, the weight of fate already settling over them all. Deep in the woods, Sheol found the hidden training chamber, carved inside a massive, hollow tree. The entrance was cloaked in old clan runes, visible only to those of clan blood. Inside, there was no grandeur, just stone worn by time and the steady hum of mana pulsing beneath the floor. He drew the boundless dagger and stared at it. This was the start, his reason, his promise. Over the next year, he wouldn't train in one discipline. He'd train in all of them. He would sharpen his magic, hone his sixth sense, master every weapon he'd ever touched. He would study the black energy coursing through him like a dark tide. He would stop fearing the demonic eye and begin using it. He wouldn't stop after 10 tries, or 100. or 1,000. If the technique didn't become instinct, he would keep going until it was part of him. He started with stretches, easing into movement, letting the quiet of the mountains swallow his first steps. No mentors, no cheers, no instructions. It didn't matter. He would earn it all, with pain, patience, and repetition. Back in his home, the Dibbe watched. At first curious, then irritated, now just tired. Chiol was nothing like he'd expected. No drama, no flair, no shortcuts, just effort. Methodical, relentless effort. He trained until his body failed, crawled into the mountains, spring to recover, then return again. No excuses, no breaks. The Dibbe couldn't read him anymore. Chiol's fate, once clear, now blurred, like someone had smeared ink over the thread. It flickered between two grim outcomes: death before 20 or exile from everything he knew. But something had shifted. The line was no longer set, and that bothered him more than he liked to admit. 3 months passed. Then nothing. Chiol disappeared. The Dibbe assumed the worst. Dead. Burned out. Another name in a long list of wasted potential. Choi had conned him into playing babysitter again, and all he'd gotten in return was the monotony of watching someone repeat the same move over and over. He lay back, buried in bottles, half asleep in disappointment. Then he heard it. A beast cry split the air, Bakey. But no one had crossed the barrier. That's when it hit him. It was Chiol. He shot through the forest like a storm, all irritation and disbelief. The Bakey wasn't a foe Chiol should have been facing. Not yet. Not alone. He found him in the thick of the trees, hunting the beast. Chiol's eyes were locked in, breathing steady, every movement sharp and intentional. He didn't even notice the Dibbe at first. When the keeper stepped into his path, Chiol halted. But he didn't back down. He looked him dead in the eye, still pulsing with adrenaline but calm. The Dibbe asked what he thought he was doing. Chiol didn't flinch. He didn't explain. He just said, "Step aside." Dibbe stepped in front of Chiol, somewhere between annoyed and confused, asking what he thought he was doing trying to take down a spirit beast. Chiol, still catching his breath, didn't even glance at him. Killing it wasn't the goal. Never was. The beast had stolen something from him, a rare elixir he'd spent weeks crafting. That was all he said before the spirit beast slipped away, disappearing back into the woods. Its camouflage kicked in, melting it seamlessly into the forest. Chiol didn't wait. He darted past Dibbe without a word, eyes fixed forward. He could still follow it. He didn't need to see it. He triggered his demonic eye, the magic warping his vision until the air shimmered faintly. That's when he caught it, a subtle shift, a flicker of motion in the canopy up ahead. Dibbe shouted after him, saying it was pointless. Once the beast turned invisible, there was no tracking it. But Chiol didn't stop. Mana surged through his legs, making every step swift and sure, allowing him to glide over rocks and roots with ease. Dibbe followed, slower now, more intrigued than upset. The way Chiol moved, precise, fast, and controlled, was nothing like the man he'd seen 3 months ago. But even that wasn't enough. The chase ended quickly. No matter how fast he ran, the beast belonged to the forest. It vanished deeper into the wild, leaving only rustling leaves behind. Chiol came to a stop, breathing hard, staring into the empty woods. The elixir was gone. All those nights, gathering rare herbs from Chanwizen's brutal terrain, harvesting bitter roots, silver-stemmed plants, and venom-soaked flowers, lost in a heartbeat. He had spent months perfecting that potion. It wasn't just helpful, it was vital. And now it was gone. Dibbe arrived behind him, saying nothing at first. Then, in a rare show of sympathy, he told Chiol not to give up. The permission to collect herbs still stood. He could start again. But Chiol only shook his head. It wasn't just about starting over. It was the sting of failure. The ingredients were scarce. His patience even more so. Chiol didn't wear sadness on his face, but something about his silence unsettled Dibbe. That calm, worn-out look hit harder than anger ever could. The truth was the spirit beast had crossed into Dibbe's territory, his domain, his responsibility. And while Dibbe hated that word, he couldn't ignore it now. He finally broke the silence, saying he'd take responsibility and make up for the stolen potion. Chiol didn't say much in return, just a nod, barely a smile, but enough to show a hint of gratitude. That's when it clicked for Dibbe. He'd been played. The whole thing, the chase, the quiet frustration, the timing, it was all deliberate. Chiol wasted no time. He asked for 2 things. First, help gathering mana herbs. Second, assistance with training. Dibbe groaned, but didn't turn him down. Back in the hidden training chamber, Sheol immediately asked for illusion magic. He wanted to fight, something real from memory. He chose the queen of human-faced spiders. Dakibi raised a brow but summoned the creature anyway. It materialized with twitching fangs and glistening eyes, towering and deadly. Sheol readied his blade, stepping in like a warrior preparing for a real battle, not a practice round. Every move was clean measured. He fought with the memory of that phantom warrior in his mind. Every motion purposeful, every breath steady. His first strike came fast, steel chi strike, Yama. The sword tore into the queen's shoulder, and she shrieked in fury. Sheol stayed focused, pulled back, exhaled, and went in again. Steel chi strike. Raging wine swept through the air, aimed to cleave her down, but she didn't fall. She lunged, claws poised to slash him, just inches away. Dakibi canceled the illusion right before impact. Sheol didn't blink. He turned, caught his breath, and asked for another opponent. This time, Jungo, his old sparring partner. On he went, perfecting each move, refining every technique. No breaks, no distractions. For 4 straight hours, he didn't stop. Not even for water. Just relentless focus. And as Dakibi watched in silence, one thought kept circling in his mind. There was something different about that sword. Something he couldn't ignore. Later that night, after hours in the training room, Sheol wandered deep into the forest and slipped into a hidden spring. Moonlight shimmered across the surface, steam rising gently into the cool air. He leaned back, letting the heat soothe the exhaustion in his arms. The peace didn't last long. Dakibi appeared beside him, carrying a bottle, and dropped into the water with a pleased sigh. He shot Sheol a grin, saying something about how even he needed a break, proof he was human after all. Sheol didn't respond, just gave a small, tired smile and rested his head again. Dakibi asked when he last took a proper rest. Said he hadn't seen anyone train like that in years, maybe longer. Sheol didn't answer, just let out a quiet laugh and started to rise, ready to turn in for the night. But Dakibi stopped him. He wanted to talk about the sword, Boundless, the one Sheol had been using nonstop. Dakibi had sensed something strange in its aura, something he couldn't ignore. At first, Sheol didn't want to explain, but when Dakibi offered to share what he knew, Sheol gave in. He said the sword's name was Boundless. He'd found it in the clan's storage room, forgotten and buried under years of dust. No records, no manuals, no markings, nothing to explain where it came from. It didn't resonate like other blades, yet somehow it responded to him, just enough to notice. Its edge never dulled, it never warmed, and it moved with his aura like it had been forged for him. Dakibi took a drink, then finally spoke. Boundless wasn't just a sword. It was a vessel created to hold limitless mana. That's how it got its name. But more than that, it had belonged to someone once. A warrior who defied fate itself. A man whose destiny had been broken, rewritten, and broken again. Someone who was never meant to survive. Dakibi wasn't certain, but when Sheol fought, he had seen hints of that same energy. He warned Sheol, the sword wouldn't reveal its true nature easily. It had to be earned. And even then, it might never fully awaken unless Sheol became the kind of person capable of bearing its weight. Sheol didn't reply. He stared down into the water, the memory of its cold steel still pressing at the edge of his thoughts. Dakibi spoke with the kind of calm that comes from outliving most memories, but holding tightly to the ones that mattered. He told Sheol a story, one buried in time, about an ancient shaman. This man could read the stars, speak with spirit beasts, and was hailed as a legend in his era. He possessed a stone, not just any artifact, but one that changed shape with his will. It grew with him, evolved with him, and through it he became unmatched. But power never comes free. The stone didn't serve him forever. In time, it twisted him, turned him feral, monstrous. What was once his strength became his curse. He lost himself. The greatest warriors of that age had to rise together, tearing through chaos and carnage just to bring him down. In the end, they sealed him away. Sheol listened quietly, eyes distant. He couldn't help but think of Boundless. The strange way it pulsed when he gripped it, the way it sometimes felt aware. He asked if that stone had been sealed in Wianwi. Dakibi shook his head. It had been locked on an island, far away. So no, it wasn't Boundless. But the feeling, that same ancient, foul presence, was there. That alone was enough for Dakibi to urge Sheol to get rid of the sword. But Sheol had heard those words before. When he awakened the demonic eye, his father had said the same thing. Seal it. Bury it. Forget it. But Sheol hadn't. He had chosen to tame it, to make it his. He would do the same with Boundless. He would shape it to his will, not the other way around. Dakibi gave a short laugh at that, impressed by the defiance, but his amusement didn't last. He stood up, and with a swift motion, summoned his massive iron club. He looked at Sheol and said he couldn't allow him to keep that blade. He wanted it now. Sheol didn't budge. His fingers didn't loosen. He stayed where he was, grip steady, eyes locked. The club came down fast, stopping just short of his face. Still, Sheol didn't flinch. He calmly reminded Dakibi of the contract, the vow to protect all who trained in the mountain. Lifting a weapon against a guest would break that vow, and Dakibi wasn't the type to break his word. With a sigh, Dakibi let the weapon vanish. Then he asked, why let it go that far if Sheol knew he wouldn't strike? Sheol just shrugged, said he was curious, maybe even having a little fun. Dakibi groaned, muttering about how infuriatingly bold he was. But his tone sobered as he warned him again. That sword was dangerous. Sheol grinned, cool and sly, and pointed out that technically, Dakibi had raised a weapon against a guest. He could report it, unless, of course, Dakibi was willing to do him a favor. In the stillness of his room, Sheol sat alone, his weapons laid out before him. Judo rested on his lap, Missplitter beside it, both gift from his brother, Jihak. He remembered the night he first drew Missplitter in the mansion, when it showed him fleeting glimpses of its past. But Judo had been different, deeper. It had taken months of quiet, sleepless nights, diving into the memories it carried. 3 months just to reach the final one. And it was there that Boundless revealed its most dangerous lesson, how to mimic any weapon's technique, as long as he had witnessed and understood it. Boundless wasn't just a blade. It was a mirror, a canvas. That changed everything. He gently placed Judo aside and reached for Hyuka. With the 4th seal now broken, more of its memories had begun to stir. The moment he touched its hilt, the world dissolved. He was pulled back into the past, the same memory he'd seen before, only now it continued. The first leader of his clan stood before him, older now, the weight of age and countless battles etched into his posture. At his feet, Hyuka. Behind him, a shaman draped in white feathers. The leader declared that none of his children were worthy of the sword. Not yet. And so, he would seal its power. The shaman hesitated, warning that sealing it would make the blade harder to wield in the future. But the leader insisted. Only someone truly worthy should awaken Hyuka. Only someone strong enough to break the seals on their own. The shaman obeyed. She raised her hands, and glowing seals bloomed across the sword in quiet pulses of light. When she turned to explain them, the memory faltered. Her voice was lost, the words stripped away. Sheol couldn't hear her. The leader then drew the blade, channeling his energy into it. Threads of mana lit up along the steel. With one swift motion, he slashed through the air, and the sword tore cleanly through the mana around them. Absolute, unyielding, but it wasn't enough. The seal was still too weak. The leader frowned and gave one final order, strengthen it. That's when the memory faded. Sheol blinked as reality settled back around him, his hands still resting on Hyuka's hilt. He looked down at the blade, thoughts racing. A sword that didn't just touch mana, but severed it, cut through raw essence like it was nothing. Not redirected, not absorbed. Cut. His heart pounded. Now he understood why it had been sealed, why his ancestors had guarded it so fiercely. And now, with each seal broken, it was becoming his. Not just in name, but in truth. A weapon like this didn't just add strength to a fight. It reshaped the rules entirely. But more than its power, Hyuka was proof. Sheol wasn't chasing legends anymore. He was stepping into one, becoming it, piece by piece, seal by seal. The queen of the human-faced spiders crumpled under a single, deafening blow, her final scream slicing through the illusion like a knife through fabric. Sheol stood motionless, breath heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the thrill of triumph. His attack had landed. The steel chi strike. Thunder had ripped through her shoulder, chest, and face in a single, searing arc. After all the defeats, the wounds, the crushing blows, and piercing fangs, he had finally done it. A clean win. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the energy settle, watching the illusion fade away like smoke in the wind. Behind him, Dakibi clapped slowly, the sound tinged with dry amusement. A win was a win, he said, but Sheol had taken too long. Too many failures led to this one moment. True strength, Dakibi reminded him, wasn't in a single strike, It was in surviving long enough to deliver it. Sheol gave a nod, but his mind was already moving on. He told Dakibi he was done. No more spiders. No more illusions. No more deaths rewound. He was ready for what came next. Those words, long awaited, nearly brought Dakibi to tears. But his joy didn't last. Not when Sheol followed it up by saying he wanted to take on the Muhi trial. He said it like he was ordering tea. Dakibi almost choked. This wasn't just another test. It was the end game, the apex of every trial carved at a Chanwizen, built by the first clan leader and amplified by Dakibi's ancient sorcery. It was a living hell, and no one walked through its gate without permission. If Dakibi said no, the door stayed shut. Sheol didn't back down. He asked, plain and direct. Was he ready? Dakibi paused. In terms of raw power? No. But sheer determination? That Sheol had in abundance. So Dakibi gave a reluctant nod and led him toward a cave he knew well, his home. Sheol frowned but followed. At the cave's mouth, Dakibi lifted a glowing blue hand and swept it through the air like drawing a curtain. The cave shimmered and split, revealing a massive wooden gate covered in runes and ancestral carvings. This was it, the entrance to the trial. Dakibi gave his final warning. Once Sheol stepped through, the door wouldn't open again until the trial was complete. No time limits. No shortcuts. Sheol gave a quiet thanks, stepped up, and pushed the door open. A burst of blinding white light erased everything. When it cleared, Sheol stood alone in a vast courtyard. Waiting at the center, still and sharp as steel, was the founder of his clan, Lee. The original, the unmatched, the one myths called a god, though others swore he never existed. But here and now, Sheol knew this wasn't legend. Lee's presence alone told the truth. Power rolled off him like heat from a forge. Just 15, yet he stood like a weapon crafted for war. Silent, deadly, perfect. Sheol gripped Boundless tighter. The rules were simple. Defeat Lee at 15, and the trial ended. Nothing more, nothing less. Every generation, someone from the Lee clan took this test. Only half made it back. He faced the myth, calm and resolute. He wouldn't lose. He wouldn't vanish as just another bastard son. He would survive. He would triumph. Sheol struck first, hoping to test Lee's strength. But it was already too late. The blade was in his chest before the attack even began. Cold, sharp, unmistakably fatal. His heart froze. Darkness swallowed everything. And then, everything shattered. Sheol jerked awake, gasping. His body was whole. No blood, no pain, just quiet. He stared at his hands, confused. There had been no sign, no aura, no magic, not even the faintest sound. Even when he'd triggered the demonic eye, there was nothing. Had Lee attacked in that single blink when his eyes shut? His jaw clenched. This wasn't like Dakibi's loops, where each death taught him something new. No misstep, no warning. Lee didn't rely on strength. He used emptiness, total silence, a void where no cues existed. Sheol had fought beasts, phantoms, illusions, and men. But this? Lee was something else. Still, Sheol rose, turned back to the gate, and faced it again. He wouldn't leave without victory. No matter how many times he died, no matter how much it cost, he would defeat Lee and claim his place in the mountain's legacy. Word of Sheol's decision reached the estate long before the mountain winds could shift. A quiet servant murmured it to his father, who stood unmoving in the grand hall of the Lee mansion, more like a sculpture than a man. His face betrayed nothing. No pride, no fear, not even concern. Just a stillness carved from something deeper. Expectation mixed with exhaustion. Sheol had torn through every challenge so far with a force of will that bordered on unnatural. But this wasn't another creature to slay or a maze of illusions to outlast. This was Lee, the first, the untouchable. The man who built a dynasty out of silence and steel. And the trial he left behind wasn't built to test power. It reached further. Those who failed didn't die because of injuries. They died because their very spirit cracked. Some came back, changed. Others didn't come back at all. Lee's sword didn't tear flesh. It shattered resolve. And now Sheol, the boy born with nothing but a name borrowed from a man he never knew and a blade soaked in curses, was walking into that legacy. His father said nothing aloud, but inside, a single question burned. Would Sheol return as himself? Or as a ghost in his own skin? Sheol died without ever seeing the strike. The first try ended in less than a heartbeat. A flicker, a hint of silver, then darkness. He woke up gasping, lungs on fire, body intact, mind spinning. He had expected something overwhelming, but not this. Not a death so silent it left no trace. There was no pressure, no flare of energy, no battle, just an end. Still, he got back up. Again and again. He came at Lee with everything. Mistwalker's flow, steel cheese precision, boundless, ever-shifting style. None of it mattered. The blade always found its mark, his chest, his throat, his spine. Every time, death claimed him before he could even react. And with it came the feeling he feared most. Helplessness. That same cold dread from his old life. The one where strength meant nothing, where pain couldn't be fought, and even his screams went unheard. His hands shook. His breath turned shallow. But he didn't give in. He'd known pain. He'd lived through collapse. The world had fallen out from under him once before, and he'd clawed his way back. He could do it again. He fought, died, then fought again, over and over. But with every fall, something shifted. The haze began to clear. Lee wasn't hiding behind flashy skills or secret timing. It was all in the motion. Simple, precise. Every swing had intention. Every step followed purpose. Nothing wasted. The more Cheol watched, the more he began to see the rhythm. Subtle, but there. It wasn't just talent. It was discipline, repetition refined into mastery. Cheol started reacting. A deflection here. A step aside there. He could survive 2 strikes now. Then 4. Then 6. His body adjusted before his mind fully caught up. Pain became a guide, pointing him toward the openings. The demonic I helped, too, tracking the flow of mana, the tiny shifts in Lee's shoulders before each blow. He wasn't battling a god. He was learning from a master. And then, Cheol changed. He stopped mimicking Jihak, stopped repeating the clan's drills. His movements stopped following any known style. He moved how he felt, quick, unstable, impossible to read. For the first time, Lee's blade missed. That's when Cheol understood this was never just a fight. It was a reflection. Every swing Lee made was asking him, "Who are you?" Every death whispered what he wasn't yet. But Cheol kept rising, and something within him broke open. This trial wasn't here to end him. It was meant to rebuild him, one failure at a time. He wasn't chasing victory anymore. He was transforming. Boundless morphed in his hand, sword to spear, spear to staff, staff to whip. Every form flowed like breath. Every weapon felt like a natural limb. He remembered his aunt's words. His power wasn't in the forms. It was in the way he refused to stay one thing. That was his strength, his freedom. Cheol moved like the wind, shifting, untamed. He soared forward, shifting mid-air, body spiraling with the spear. A steel chi strike surged out, wrapped in the fury of raging wind. Lee blocked it, but only most of it. His sword splintered, then snapped, and finally, the founder fell, cleaved cleanly by the boy no one had bet on. The illusion broke. Light spilled into the cave like the first morning. The mountain trembled. Dakibi snapped upright, ears twitching. It had been a month. He begun to wonder if Cheol had joined the others, lost, swallowed by the trial. But as soon as the earth shook, he knew. The gate creaked open, and Cheol emerged. His body scarred, hair unkempt, eyes razor-sharp. He didn't look like a victor. He looked like a survivor. That night, Cheol slipped into the healing springs, muscles taut with exhaustion. Every inch of him ached, quiet and deep. Dakibi watched from the edge. Most who passed the trial came out hollow, empty-eyed, altered forever. But Cheol hadn't lost anything. If anything, he'd found something, a quiet steadiness. When Dakibi asked how he felt, Cheol let out a breath and leaned back. "Never again," he muttered. Dakibi chuckled. He'd expected Cheol to jump right back into training, push for more. But when he asked what came next, Cheol said nothing about strength or goals. He just wanted to rest. That surprised Dakibi more than any blow ever had. But Cheol wasn't finished. He reminded Dakibi of the promise, the favor he was owed, and, without pause, he made his request. He wanted to borrow the Dakibi club. Dakibi didn't answer right away. He stared at Cheol, blinking slowly, as if unsure he'd heard him right. The Dakibi club wasn't something you could just hand over like some basic training scroll or a spare artifact. It was born from destruction and starfire, bound by magic and sealed with his very name. It carried the weight of ancient wars, barely held in check by Dakibi's will, a relic that had shattered mountains and razed cities long before clans ever existed. The idea of lending it to someone, especially a human, was laughable. Dakibi tried to explain, warned that just touching it might be enough to break Cheol's bones. But Cheol didn't flinch. He wasn't being arrogant, wasn't joking, threatening, or would try and make a deal. He simply asked, calm certain. This was the favor he wanted. Dibbe could have said no. He should have. But something in Sheol's eyes made him pause. With a grunt, he summoned the weapon. The air split with a crack as the club appeared, dropping into Sheol's waiting hands, and instantly slipped from his grip like a landslide. It slammed into the floor, shaking the walls and burying itself deep in the ground. Dibbe winced. Sheol hadn't even managed to lift it, yet still insisted on using it. Muttering under his breath, Dibbe turned and left, leaving Sheol alone with the weapon. Sheol didn't reach for it again. His arms were already numb, still aching from the moment he touched it. That weight, it wasn't meant for him, but he hadn't come to swing it like a warrior. Power wasn't what he was chasing. What he wanted was buried deeper. The club had survived countless battles, clashed with divine weapons, destroyed what the world now called lost relics. Every impact, every encounter had left a mark, memories carved into its very magic. And that's what Sheol was after. If he could unlock those echoes, he could learn every technique, every movement, every divine weapon's essence. That was his real aim. He sat down in front of it, crossed his legs, and pressed his palm to the club. A pulse of dark energy flowed from his hand, demonic magic threading into the runes on the weapon's surface. The reaction was instant. A voice screamed into his mind, slamming him backward into the wall. Pain exploded through his back, but he let out a low, breathless laugh. It had worked. The weapon remembered. It had spoken, and that was all he needed. When the month ended, he stepped out of the cave. Dibbe handed him a bundle of supplies with a muttered complaint about needing more alcohol. Sheol chuckled, nodded, and said he'd come back. Then he asked a question that made Dibbe stop cold. Did you ever want to leave this mountain? Dibbe laughed it off. Food, drink, quiet, what more could he want? But Sheol's voice shifted quieter now. More certain, he said he'd return to help Dibbe reclaim his name. The true name, the one that had been stolen by the founder himself. Dibbe froze. That story hadn't been spoken aloud in centuries. Everyone believed he had stayed here out of duty, a guardian bound by honor after losing a battle. But that wasn't the truth. Lee hadn't spared him out of mercy. He had stolen Dibbe's name, the core of his being. Without it, Dibbe was chained to this mountain, bound to guard the trial, unable to return to his realm or speak his truth. Only a descendant of Lee could break the bond. No one else had known. Yet this boy, barely more than a child, had made a promise to free him. It might have been a lie, a trick, but Dibbe believed him. There was something in Sheol, a steady flame beneath all the chaos. He saw things others didn't, even when silent. As Sheol disappeared down the mountain path, Dibbe whispered a name into the wind. A name he hadn't spoken in ages. Just once, wondering if Sheol might be the one to give it back. At the base, Choi stood waiting. Hands folded, expression unreadable. He told Sheol his things had been moved. Sheol expected to be led to the office. Instead, they walked to the main training hall. The doors swung open. Inside stood his father, blade drawn, waiting in silence. The moment Sheol entered the training hall, he could feel the air change. His father stood waiting, sword already drawn, posture straight and steady. This wasn't a greeting. It was a challenge. But instead of striking, his father asked about the past year. His voice was too calm, almost calculated. Sheol paused, then said he'd grown stronger. But seeing his father standing there, timeless and rigid, made that claim feel hollow. He wasn't ready for this. Yet he didn't show it. He answered with confidence. Unexpectedly, his father joked, something about Sheol learning to flatter now. He didn't reply. In both of his lives, he had never heard the man joke. It threw him off. Choi came in silently, nodding once to say the tea was ready. Sheol followed without hesitation. They sat at the low table. Steam swirled from the pot, the scent of dried leaves and clay lingering in the air. No questions about missions or results. Instead, his father asked how the journey felt. Not what Sheol did, what he experienced. That alone felt like another trial. Sheol paused again, but something in his father's gaze made him speak. He didn't share everything, but he was honest. About the mountain, the isolation, the struggle, the sense of starting over, standing in the ruins of a life that once was. His father didn't interrupt, just lifted his teacup, still as stone, letting the words settle. Even he looked uneasy, like this moment didn't fit him. Sheol admitted he didn't want to waste the chance his father had given him, the freedom to grow. His father nodded, then cut in sharply. Why had he returned late? Sheol froze. He couldn't mention breaking Hyuka's seal. That would only raise more questions. So he lied, said he'd stopped in Samyang to honor their ancestors, to show the elders his progress, not just in words but in action. He expected doubt. What he got was anger. His father's voice dropped, cutting through the calm with icy precision. He called Cheol arrogant for showing off. The words hit hard, but Cheol didn't flinch. He spoke the truth buried beneath the lie. He hadn't gone seeking praise. He had gone because of tradition. Because even as an outsider, a bastard son, he was still of the Marshall Lee bloodline. He wanted to prove he deserved to be part of it. His father stayed silent for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he let it go. No punishment, but the reprieve didn't last. The air changed again. His father's tone turned firm, reminding Cheol that what he had approved was training at the mountain, not the ordeal Cheol had taken on. And for stepping beyond that boundary, there would be consequences. This wasn't discussion anymore. It was judgment. The test had begun. That was why they were in the hall to begin with. Choi returned, carrying Hyuka, wrapped in a long black cloth. As Cheol reached out to take it, his father stopped him with a question. Could he really fight with that blade at full strength? Cheol froze. That single question revealed everything his father knew about Boundless. There was no use hiding it now. He summoned the weapon. It formed in his grasp, a long black blade, coiling in a shape like it had always belonged there. Heavy, familiar, alive. Still, his father didn't move. He offered Cheol the first move. That gesture alone carried a message. Cheol activated the demonic eye. Nothing, no aura, no sign of chi, no intention. His father was unreadable, like staring into silent, unmoving water, far beyond reach. He deactivated the eye. It wouldn't help. No more delay. He poured everything into his opening move. All the chi he had honed, the magic he'd tamed, the fear he'd swallowed. Steel chi strike, demon piercer, infused with raging wind and frost aura. This was it. He charged, blade tearing through the air like a flash of lightning. His father didn't so much as blink. He lifted his sword with one hand and swept Cheol's attack aside, as easily as brushing away smoke. The gap between them was overwhelming. But Cheol didn't waver. He'd expected this. Winning wasn't the goal. Enduring was. Then came the words, harder than any strike. His father told him to stop, asked if that was the extent of what he'd gained from his so-called trial. Cheol lowered Boundless. His blood still thrummed with power, but he held firm. No, that wasn't all. He discovered a strength no one could copy. Not born of privilege or lineage, but forged through relentless pressure. A force that broke him over and over, forcing him to rebuild each time. That was the gift. And the curse. Now he would sharpen it until nothing could break him again. He would turn it into a weapon stronger than any blade. The trial taught him something deeper than how to fight. It taught him that strength isn't about winning. It's about never collapsing. No matter how many defeats come, no matter how deep the fall, even if it meant dragging himself forward with nothing but broken bones and grit, he would never stop. That was his truth. That was how he conquered the mountain. And that was what he would bring into every fight. Even this one. Cheol stood before his father, the training hall thick with the scent of metal and sweat. His heartbeat was calm, but his mind churned. His father didn't ask about techniques or victories. He wanted to know what Cheol had truly experienced during the trial. Cheol paused. How do you explain something that even you don't fully understand? Was it pain? Growth? Something like being reborn? He simply said it was hard to put into words. That alone earned him a look of disapproval. His father told him that if he couldn't speak clearly about what he'd gone through, then he didn't really understand his own journey. That quiet, unresolved feeling inside him. It would betray him one day. Then came something unexpected. His father said Cheol hadn't unleashed his strongest attack. Cheol admitted it. There had been more. A part of him that went beyond limits and logic. A version of himself even he hadn't fully grasped. But there was no scolding, just a nod. If Cheol had come back weak or unchanged, punishment would have been swift. But he hadn't. Cheol lowered his head and apologized. He meant it, but apologies didn't carry much weight anymore. His father pressed him. What came next? Cheol had waited for this. All his sacrifices, his silent suffering, led to this moment. He said he had already outgrown the academy. He was stronger than any third-year cadet. Going back would be a waste. But he couldn't take the next step without his father's consent. His father's voice snapped, just say it. So Cheol did. He wanted to set out, to begin his warrior's path. His father's expression barely changed, but his eyes narrowed. He asked if that's why Cheol had gone to Chanwizen. Sheol said it wasn't the only reason. He went to push himself to sharpen his body and strength. His father interrupted. Chasing two things at once would ruin him. It sounded harsh, but Sheol didn't hear it that way. It was a warning, one born of disappointment, maybe, but it rang true. And Sheol took it seriously. He wouldn't make that mistake again. That lesson was carved deep into him now. He wouldn't forget what it cost to be divided. His father stayed silent for a long while, thinking. A warrior's path wasn't something handed out. Members of the Lee clan usually began theirs at 17 or 18, leaving the safety of the clan, stripped of all protection, and returning only when they had something to prove. Victories, strength, stories earned through blood and hardship. Sheol was only 15, far too young, but also far too powerful to overlook. His father saw the risk. Letting Sheol leave now would stir the balance of power among the siblings. It would spark ambition, fuel rivalries. But Sheol had already crossed the line of what was expected. Normal rules no longer applied. Finally, his father looked at him. Cold gaze, measured voice. He said Sheol could begin his journey, but only under two conditions. He didn't reveal them just yet, but the permission was real. The next morning, Sheol visited his uncle. The room was quiet. Wooden beams, aged with time. Light soft and warm. His uncle greeted him with theatrical warmth, that same familiar energy he always carried. But Sheol noticed it. Faint shadows under his eyes, fatigue just beneath the surface of his smile. He turned down the offered drink, already full from his nanny's overly generous breakfast, but he didn't let the concern slide. He asked why his uncle looked so tired. His uncle brushed it off with a laugh. Just work, he said. Sheol didn't pry. Instead, he took out a small box, something he had poured weeks of effort in a bag at Chonwizen. Inside was a pill, carefully crafted to stabilize and enhance mana reserves. A feat even seasoned warriors struggled with. It wasn't flawless, but it worked. And more importantly, Dibbe had personally approved it. That made it invaluable. His uncle's playful curiosity turned into stunned silence. He took the pill in one gulp, and almost immediately he felt it. Mana flowing stronger, smoother, deeper. The change was instant, unmistakable. Sheol told him it worked like an elixir, but the effects would last far longer. His uncle stayed still, feeling the surge of mana ripple through him, before asking the inevitable. Did Sheol have the recipe? Sheol nodded. He had committed the entire process to memory, and with time, he was confident he could replace some of the rarer ingredients with more practical alternatives. His uncle reacted instantly. He told Sheol to keep the formula secret, not out of selfishness, but for safety. Knowledge like that could tip delicate power balances or fall into the wrong hands and be corrupted. Sheol agreed. He had no plans to spread it carelessly, but someday he might sell them. If that day ever came, he asked for his uncle's help. That earned a laugh. His uncle teased him, always knowing how to exploit his soft spot. But the mood didn't stay light for long. His uncle's tone shifted, weight settling back into the conversation. He asked if Sheol was truly set on starting the warrior's path. Sheol didn't hesitate. Yes, but they both knew the real obstacle, the council. They'd always looked down on him. To them, he wasn't a legitimate heir of the clan, and they would never willingly approve. His uncle reminded him that even his father's backing might not be enough. But Sheol was ready. His father hadn't just given him approval. He'd laid down two conditions. And once those were fulfilled, not even the council would be able to argue. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.